Great. In that case, it's 7:03, and I'll call this meeting to order. We have a roll call, please.
Starting with Dustin Allred.
Here.
Jane Billman.
Here.
Andrew Fell.
Here.
Tyler Fitch.
Here.
Lou Hopkins.
Lou, you're muted.
We'll come back
He's
to
here.
Lou.
Yeah.
Jonah Weisskopf.
Here.
Shen-Chi Yu.
Here.
And one last time for Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. We have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there are not.
Great. Next item is we have the minutes of the September 24th, 2020 Plan Commission meeting. Do we have any motions regarding the minutes?
I'll have at it. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Mr. Fell, motion. Second? I'll second it. Jane seconds it. Second by Ms. Billman. Okay, now this has to be a roll call vote.
Correct.
So if we could please have that when you're ready.
Yes. Jane Billman.
Yes.
Andrew Fell.
Yes.
Tyler Fitch.
Yes.
Lou Hopkins.
Yes.
Jonah Weisskopf.
Yes.
Shen-Chi Yu.
Yes.
Dustin Allred.
Minutes are approved.
Yes.
Did I jump the gun there, Mr. Allred? Sorry about that.
Okay.
The minutes are approved. Number 4, communications. We have a lot of communications in regard to the Plan Commission cases that we are hearing tonight. So I'm going to wait and summarize the communications at the time of each case, just prior to the public hearings, the public input portion of the hearing. And Mr. Garcia, I believe you did want to talk a little bit about some recent guidelines in regard to the public input portion of city meetings, including city council and boards and commissions.
Okay, sounds like my microphone is working. Somebody give me a thumbs up if it is. Okay, thank you. Yes, so if you all were on the Plan Commission website, you may have noticed that there were some new public input guidelines. These are based on an ordinance that City Council passed a couple of weeks back. And I wanted to summarize those a little bit. They don't affect a whole lot of what Plan Commission usually does, because specifically they're focusing on the audience participation section, and not the participation during public hearings. So that item 9, agenda item 9, that's on our Plan Commission agendas is really what the audience participation of those guidelines is talking about. I had initially thought that I would sort of go through each of these sections on here, but I believe it's going to be kind of a long meeting tonight, so I'll just let everybody read the majority of those on their own. Just the one pertinent bit of info that I will read is about audience participation. And that section says that protocol for public input is one of respect for the process and respect for others. Ridicule, obscene or profane language, lack of respect for others, and personal attacks are not acceptable behavior. Public input shall not be used to air personal grievances. Speakers should address all comments to the public body as a whole and not to individual members or city staff. And then the pertinent bit is that it says public comment shall be limited to 4 minutes per person. Again, that's in just the public input section, agenda item number 9. The current bylaws for the Plan Commission say that public comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, so this supersedes that rule. If anybody has any questions, I can answer those, but I just wanted to share this with you, let you know that these are on the website for tonight's meeting.
Great, thank you. We don't have any continued public hearings. We don't have any old business. We do have some new public hearings. The first one is Plan Case 2410M20. Request by James and Spencer Dobrovolny to rezone 5 properties from R3 to R5 in the 702, 704, 706, 708 West High Street and 309 South Kohler. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Trotter.
Sorry, I was muted. I have a
Okay.
staff presentation. Oops. There we go. James and Spencer Dobrovolny request a rezoning of 5 parcels from R3 single and 2-family residential to R5 medium high density multifamily residential at 702, 704, 706, and 708 West High Street and 309 South Kohler Avenue. The applicants have tuned in remotely to answer any questions you may have. We have received a number of phone calls regarding questions about the case and several communications, all in opposition of the rezoning request. And staff recommends denial of the rezoning. The property is located at the northwest corner of West High Street and South Kohler Avenue, east of Lincoln Avenue. The parcels total roughly 27,700 square feet. It's a little over 0.65 acres, and they are currently occupied by single-family homes and 1 home that has been converted into apartments. The homes on the property have been there for over 50 years, since before the applicant purchased the property. And the applicant does not currently have any proposed development plans, so the rezoning from R3 to R5 appears to be speculative. This is a zoning map of the parcels in the surrounding area. The property is zoned R3 single and 2-family residential. The parcels to the north are zoned MOR, which is mixed office and residential, and 1 is zoned R5, medium high density multiple family residential. Parcels to the east mirror the same zoning pattern, MOR on the north side of the block and R3 on the south side of the block. The R3 zoning acts as a buffer between higher density zoning to the north and lower density zoning to the south. The parcels are all zoned R2, single family residential, and the parcels to the west between Busey Avenue and Lincoln Avenue are zoned a mixture of R4, R5, and R6 residential districts. That is the Lincoln-Busey corridor. This is a future land use map. The future land use designation for this property is residential, described as containing primarily single-family residential housing, but may also include a variety of compatible land uses, such as duplexes, townhomes, civic uses, institutional uses, and parks where zoning is appropriate. Residential areas can have different physical patterns of development. Mixed residential and multifamily residential designations can be seen to the north and to the west. However, the subject property is designated residential. This is future land use map number 9. Additionally, this map shows the southern half of the West Urbana neighborhood. The comprehensive plan outlines strategies for neighborhood development for the West Urbana neighborhood. There are 4 of them. Explore neighborhood conservation district strategies, promote single-family residential uses in areas zoned for single-family, preserve existing zoning protections, and new development to respect traditional physical development pattern. The R3 zoning district in the area acts as a transition between R2 properties to the south and MOR properties to the north. The comprehensive plan clearly calls for the preservation of the existing uses and does not call for higher density residential development in this area. These are some site photos of the homes that exist on the properties now. And it starts with 309 South Kohler and moves around the block, moving west. To summarize, staff found that the case does not meet the LaSalle criteria or the requirements for rezoning. The parcels along the north side of West High Street from Busey Avenue to McCullough Street are all zoned R3 with the exception of one property zoned R4. While the West Urbana neighborhood has a variety of housing types ranging in density, the R3 zoning along the north side of West High Street acts as a buffer between higher residential uses to the north and along Green Street and lower residential uses and zoning to the south. The applicant does not have development plans for the property. Without a proposed development project, it is difficult to determine whether or not the rezoning would have an effect on neighboring property values. The proposed rezoning would not likely affect the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public. The properties would still be zoned for residential uses. However, the rezoning would allow for higher floor area ratio and multifamily uses. The public would likely see no gain if the property is rezoned to R5, medium high density multiple family residential. The properties already contain occupied rental homes under the R3 zoning, so it does not appear that there is any hardship to the property owners that necessitates a rezoning. Here's another photo. The properties individually are well suited for single family residential uses, as those uses now exist on the property. The combined property is 0.65 acres, so in terms of size, it could be well suited for multifamily residential uses. However, the future land use designation discourages higher density residential uses and encourages preservation of the existing single family uses on the properties. Additionally, if the property is rezoned to R5, the applicant could build to the maximum development standards of the zoning district, which would allow for a maximum floor area ratio of 0.90, over double what is currently allowed on the site. The property is not vacant and has not been vacant since the applicant purchased the individual parcels. The existing homes have been there for over 50 years. And absent a market study, it is difficult to say whether or not more of these developments are needed or if the supply is caught up with the demand. In this case, there is no proposed use. It is simply a request to rezone the properties with no stated plans to redevelop. In the comprehensive plan, the properties are identified as part of the residential future land use designation. In the West Urbana neighborhood, the comprehensive plan states promote single family residential uses in areas zoned for single family. The proposed rezoning to R5 medium high density multiple family zoning district would not be consistent with this designation. And for our recommendation, the Plan Commission has the following options: recommend approval of the rezoning request, recommend approval of the rezoning request with conditions, or recommend denial of the rezoning request. And staff recommends that the Plan Commission make a recommendation to City Council to deny the zoning map amendment. And I can take any questions you have now.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trotter. Do any Plan Commissioners have questions for city staff? If so, just raise your hand and let me know, and I'll call on you. No? We're good? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now let me just explain the procedures for a public hearing. So we've just had a staff report. Now the petitioner, if they're on this Zoom, can address the Plan Commission. Following that, anybody who is in favor of the proposal can address the commission. Following that, anyone opposed can address the commission. Then at the end, we'll give the petitioner one last time to address the commission, and we will close the public input portion and discuss and possibly vote. I will say before we get going here that we have over 20 letters, emails, pieces of communication from people who all were opposed. And the reasons for opposal were that it violates the comprehensive plan. It would lead to noise. There's a drainage tunnel cutting through there that was of concern, parking and traffic issues, families and neighborhood issues, empty units already in the area. The R3 is a buffer for the R2 from the MOR. Precedent for more of these types of developments if this one is approved. And then the history of maintaining this particular neighborhood as lined out in the downtown to campus plan and the comprehensive plan and the Lincoln-Busey corridor, which is near. So if the petitioner is on and would like to address the commission now, please introduce yourself and tell us what your thoughts are. I don't see anybody with the name of the petitioner. I don't know if there's a representative or.
I do see. Yeah, here we go. Dobie.
Oh, Dobie. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Is it all right for me to address you
yes,
now?
it is. You should be unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm a little bit at a loss to describe how I feel. I did receive an email from Carolyn Baxley urging me to withdraw my petition, or there would essentially be public shaming. There would be a firestorm, and that my interest in preservation is questioned. Now, I own probably the oldest single-family home in Urbana at 402 West Elm. And I bought it over 40 years ago when it was a cut-up building into 3 apartments. My son Spencer, who's joining me in this application, lived there 20 years ago and converted it to a single-family home. And it still sits there as such, and I rent it. I own 5 other single-family or duplex homes in the State Streets area, all of which are 100 years old or more, that I continuously maintain and have for the entire time of my ownership. I own a building in Champaign that's over 100 years old, a grade school, that is also an apartment building, 15 units in that. And I continuously maintain that. So I'm a little bit of a loss as to why so many people take umbrage at what I'm trying to do here. But be that as it may, as an example, my son Spencer, who's joined in this petition, he lived at 706 West High and other houses in West Urbana for many, many years. He was the only owner-occupied home on the entire block, including across the street. This block is particularly high in density. One neighbor has 25 units, and all of the neighbors of this property have 3 or more units. All of them. The tunnel that was mentioned in one of the emails runs directly underneath a 25-unit apartment building. So I'm not overly concerned about that, to be honest. Unless the city will continue to not maintain it, then I do have a concern. Now, preservation can have some ugly, unintended consequences. What is being preserved? The mostly homogeneous, white, upper middle class community of West Urbana that people of color have been denied access to for generations? There are still some deed restrictions memorialized forever in the public record that prohibit people of color to own homes here. Over time, those restrictions were outlawed, but the backdrop of circumstance that these homes were born from does not merely fade away. This lack of access and blatant racism got built into the, quote, character, unquote, of this neighborhood over generations. You cannot decouple this inequity from the character. I've worked in this neighborhood. My office is in this neighborhood. I own property in this neighborhood. And to be honest, I'm sure many of you may have different totals or different numbers, but I am aware of no Black-owned or Black owner-occupied single-family homes in the State Street area. Surely someone will come up with an example, but that's just one of thousands of homes. Now think about this as you consider what you've been working so long and hard to protect. Higher density gives more opportunity for diversity of race, income, and age in this neighborhood where it is needed most. Let's stop talking about encroachment and start talking about inclusion. What else is being preserved? Certainly not Mother Earth. Old single-family homes are energy hogs. They are leaky and toxic. Transportation and buildings are the two biggest offenders of greenhouse gas emissions. We know that by adding density at close proximity to public transportation hubs, town centers, hospitals, and universities, you can feed two birds with one seed. You're able to build energy efficient structures that house more people in closer proximity, which equals less resource demand. At the same time, you're putting more people closer to their workplace, transit, and services, which saves on vehicle miles traveled. The last thing this neighborhood needs is to stay stuck in that past. Let's build community, let's build diversity, let's build equity, let's build efficiency, let's build density where this city needs it the most. Let's build a future. Now, one of the emails that I was able to note that was included in the materials that were sent to us, the gentleman and his wife lamented that there'll be a huge increase in traffic. Yet, with the bus line a half a block away, I don't see that happening. And yet it was all right for him to tear down some small structure and build a mausoleum for his cars to park in there. I don't know. It seems rather hypocritical. But be that as it may, I think our reputation of being good landlords, I've always met the inspections that are had at my homes. I don't have tenant complaints with the landlord-tenant union. I'm a Champaign-Urbana almost lifelong resident with some exceptions to go off to school. So I'm a little offended by some of the attitudes of a few who are voicing their opinions against this proposal. A firestorm, perhaps, but I don't understand why. The one gentleman and his wife, who I mentioned previously, they live a block away to the east of this. And a block and a half to the east of them is a 12-unit, at least, apartment building on the same side of the street that he seems to be able to coexist with. And I don't know that there are any problems arising from the presence of that. And then when I look at the block that our properties sit on, they may be zoned R3 or R4, but their units are as though it were R5. There are no other single-family homes on that block that aren't either a group home or apartment buildings that are touching our property. We have no interface with any single-family homes. If you want a buffer, High Street is a buffer. Streets are buffers. When I hear some of the language about preservation, preservation is code for exclusion. It's redlining at its most subtle form. How many people of color or minorities were on that commission that drew up the MOR or the zoning or the comprehensive plan that we're now looking at maybe to remodel in the next few years, apparently. How many? I bet they had no input. How many live in the district? I've walked that neighborhood for years. I don't see anything other than white families living there and students. That's about it. So I am a little sensitive to the complaint that was raised by Ms. Baxley, but I do believe she's entitled to her opinion, and she's been my friend for many, many years. I was one of the initial members of the board on PACA when it was first going. The house I mentioned at 402 West Elm won a preservation award from PACA. So I don't think I'm coming into this with an evil heart. I just want to make the best use of that property. And I'm not going to be like some others who will just let the properties go to ruin and then you'll have to do something with it. That's not my nature or way. I don't believe in that. But you see it in various parts of our community. So I would ask you to look at the equities in this, particularly on the block on which we sit. It is all high density use. If they're concerned about the aesthetics of an apartment building, there's one right there at Kohler and Green that's been built in the last 5 or 6 years. It's a beautiful building. There's older apartment buildings on Green Street as well in about the 500 block or so. There are places for this type of development. I didn't ask to put this right in the middle of all of this, State Streets area. This is on the backside of an MOR R, whatever it is, 4 or 5 district, contiguous to it. And I do appreciate the time and commitment that you board members have committed to this proceeding, as well as just doing the job that you do. It's a hard job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions from the Plan Commission for Mr. Dobrovolny? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anybody on the call who wants to speak in support of the proposal? Is there anybody on the call who wants to speak opposed to it? Now, keep in mind that if you've already emailed us, then if you want to, address this again, that's fine. But please try to, keep it as brief as you can. So, yeah, I see some people raising your hands in the attendees window. If you want to talk, go ahead and do that, and I'll run down the list in the order I see it on the screen, which is probably random. Okay, I've got Leslie Sherman.
Hi, my name's Leslie Sherman. I live at 513 West Oregon Street in Urbana. I live about 3 blocks from this proposed development. And I oppose this development. That purpose, I believe the comprehensive plan was made the way it was on purpose to keep that buffer zone to protect my property values. So I want to make sure that encroachment does not happen. So I oppose this. I think that we actually have a lot of diversity, more than this individual thinks in our neighborhood. And the issue is, while he would like to increase his property values by combining these and making these R5, I would like to maintain my property values by this staying an R3 and providing that buffer that it's supposed to by the comprehensive plan and to reduce that encroachment. We have lots of properties already that are high density within our neighborhood, and there are a number of them that have for rent signs outside. I don't really feel like we need more added to that. So I am in opposition of this proposal. Thank you. I hope you will deny the request.
Okay, if you could just hold on, we'll see if there's any questions. Did plan commissioners have any questions for Chairman? No? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Richard Moore. I'm trying to unmute
Can
you.
you hear me?
There you are.
Okay, great. There was one factual mistake in the petitioner's claims. The immediately across from the properties 401 South Kohler is owner occupied, and he's the only person that lives there. My name is Richard Moore. Moore is spelled M-O-H-R. I urge the commission to vote against the proposed High Street rezoning. Since 1985, I've owned and lived in a 1,400 square foot Cape Cod directly kitty corner from the proposed project. My home is on the City of Urbana's list of its 100 most significant buildings and is currently ringed all around with other vintage homes of single family design. To build a 24,000 square foot modular bunker pointed at it across a 3 zoning category leap, R5 to R2, is like having an aircraft carrier square off with a dinghy. Allowing an R5 building to wedge into the core of West Urbana would irreparably damage the neighborhood's unique texture, character, and history, all of which the 2005 comprehensive plan explicitly seek to preserve. The sole ground the developers offer for the project's conformity to the comprehensive plan is that it matches high-density contiguous properties. Well, the developers' lots touch an apartment building that was built in accordance with the MOR zoning and a pre-MOR, MOR, R5 apartment from which, according to the comprehensive plan, the current R3 zoning along High Street is supposed to serve as a buffer for the R2 zoning to the south. So the application cites as its sole evidence for conformity with the plan, the very thing from which the plan is supposed to be protecting the single-family dwellings to the south. The project would destroy the buffer for nearly the length of a block. In the same vein, the developer's proposal sets up West Urbana as a series of dominoes. If the mere existence of high-density apartments in one block justifies upzoning the next, then there's no stopping a march of high-density R5 apartment buildings right across the city. The developer, without evidence, claims a pressing need for more student apartments. Monday before last, the New York Times reported that American universities experienced a 16% drop in freshman enrollments this fall. That drop will hit the rental market next year. But the current local rental market is already depressed. Nearly every day I walk from my house to the mailbox at Busey in Illinois. Through the entire fall, virtually every rental between Kohler and Lincoln on Illinois has had a for rent sign for renting right now, not for next fall. The house one south of mine, which for each of the last 35 years has been a warren for 68 students, has stood empty through the entire fall with a for rent sign outside. Any reconsideration of R3 zoning along High Street should not be taken up piecemeal, but as part of the new comprehensive plan currently in the works. To save West Urbana, please vote no on the zoning proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Moore? No, thank you. And now Eric Sachs.
Let's see. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Eric Sachs from 507 West High Street. Firstly, I'd like to say that the petitioner does not speak for the community, although he tried to. Clearly, the large number of people who've communicated against this shows otherwise, and the strong feeling of the community. Secondly, the main argument that the petitioner makes is that we should ignore the city's master plan for growth. Clearly, if that is to be the case, then it's a free-for-all. And there's little that one can do to plan for what kind of growth one would invest in any part of the city, as pointed out by the previous speaker. And I could easily see that this would just lead to a rash of development with one-off requests going up and down High Street and throughout the rest of the neighborhoods surrounding here. And lastly, towards the argument of the need for more density, the student population at the university has essentially been flat for the last 10 years. So there is not a great need for additional high density. And the creation of new housing units within the city primarily just moves people around from one spot to another, but it doesn't really address a need for additional housing. So it creates winners and losers. And really that should be something for the marketplace to decide with a fair set of rules about where development of a certain size is allowed to take place and where development of another size is allowed to take place. So I would encourage you to uphold the current plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Any questions for Mr. Sachs from the Plan Commission? No, thank you, sir. I don't see any more hands up. So here's sort of your last chance. If you emailed us with your thoughts, there's
Chair
one.
Fitch, yes.
I see that now. Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Tracy Chong from Urbana. I just want to give some general comments. And I want to say that the firestorm, so-called named firestorm by some loud voices, is that it's created by a small number of people in the West Urbana neighborhood with very loud voices. And I want to say that these loud voices are also not representative of the entire neighborhood. So please take that into consideration as you make your decision. This is what the loud voices do. They do it here, they do it on the neighborhood mailing list. People who disagree with the opinions are shamed on the list. And one resident was even reported to the city for voicing opposing comments. These small number of residents who are in opposition have often voiced anti-renter, anti-landlord sentiments. They are against non-traditional single-family group living. Many people want to move to the West Urbana neighborhood for several reasons, including the great location, the ease of transport to the university. General comments, but I think we should welcome moves that improve the diversity of the neighborhood and not take every single measure to block change. I agree that it's a very not diverse neighborhood, and people want to maintain the status quo. And I urge, when you guys make decisions, I'm not speaking specifically, but when you guys make decisions, to think about what people are trying to protect. Thank you.
Can I just ask one quick clarifying question? So are you in favor of the proposal?
I'm not speaking in favor or opposed. I just want to let you know that people who speak with are not the voices of everybody in the neighborhood, and that I do agree with the petitioner about the lack of diversity in the neighborhood, and I do agree that people who are opposed to the changes do so for reasons such as anti-renter, anti-landlord, and trying to prevent diversity.
Okay,
Thank
thank you for clarifying that. Any questions for Ms. Chong? No, thank you. Got a couple more hands go up. We've got Dan Corkery. You should, you're still muted.
How about that?
There you are.
Okay. Good evening, folks. It's nice to see your faces. I wish we were all in the same building, but that's not possible. I'm the person who lives at 602 West High Street. Me and my wife and our daughter, our adult daughter, and you know, the petitioner referred to our mausoleum for our cars. I wish he hadn't, because it's not a mausoleum, it's a carriage house. It's rather tasteful, I think, and you know, it's made extensive use, and I think it's added to the value of our neighborhood. I submitted a rather lengthy letter, and in that letter, I kind of concluded where I described this neighborhood as being a precious one. And I want to read from a portion of a column that I wrote for the News Gazette 4 years ago that I think amplifies on this idea that this being a precious neighborhood. I said in that column, we occupy a neighborhood that is an asset to the university. When prospective members are considering a job offer from the university, they ask themselves, why Champaign-Urbana? There are no beaches, no mountains, no scenic overlooks, no big city life. For years, the U of I has successfully wooed hundreds of professors because they excel in their field, while their kids can have a nice college town to grow up in. To many faculty and staff, West Urbana epitomizes the college town experience. Walk bike to campus, to the neighborhood schools, to the parks, to the farmers market. In fact, West Urbana is the largest single-family neighborhood adjacent to campus. Development has swallowed all the others. If the city's leaders fail to embrace the neighborhood value, they will harm the university as much as the calcified pals in Springfield. And unfortunately, I don't know that our politicians in Springfield always respect, especially Mike Madigan and his friends always respect this university. I think we all here understand the value of this university to our country, to our planet. We certainly understand its value to this community. This neighborhood is a part of the campus. It is, as I say, the last single-family neighborhood adjacent to campus. Everything else is gone. So when you look at the comprehensive plan, I think what undergirds it is the spirit of neighborhood, this walkability, this bikeability, this very convenient location. It undergirds that comprehensive plan. That's why it was written the way it was written, because of the value of this neighborhood. I press upon this, all you folks. I hope you've read my letter that I submitted, because I think it points out some very factual problems with the petition. But I hope you also understand the value and the spirit in which the comprehensive plan was devised. It's been, there's been a lot of input over the years, and that's why it is the way it is. So with that, I say thank you and good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Corkery? Nope, thank you, sir. Christopher Hansen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hansen. I live a couple blocks away from the proposed development. I wasn't really planning on speaking, and I'm not really speaking in favor or against. I just wanted to echo some of the comments earlier that frequently I agree that when these issues of in development come up, I completely understand both arguments from both sides, people who want to see development happen and people who want to keep the neighborhood intact. And in a way, both sides are right, I think. But I wanted to offer, what I don't like is hearing things that have come off as anti-student, particular kind of tenant or resident. Everyone has their different financial means, and I think Urbana probably wants to offer the possibility that people of different means can live in a certain area. The people who live in West Urbana we live in West Urbana for particular reasons. The old houses, growth trees, things that are there. Sometimes old houses can't stay around forever. But the point is, people who have less means should still have a chance to live in those neighborhoods, and some of these higher density opportunities can offer that. So again, I'm not speaking really in favor or against it, and I just wanted to kind of put that out there. There is definitely a vitriol of sorts by certain parties against, I think, landlords and students and any kind of change. And I would like to see this board dispense of any of that and then just focus on the logic of the proposal and the details, because I don't think Urbana wants to buy into that vitriol. And the last thing I wanted to do is suggest to the board, I heard someone say earlier that the student population at the U of I was flat for the last decade. That is not my understanding. My understanding is we've been increasing every year and we're at all-time highs. I don't know if, I don't know what caused that statement, but I'd sure like to hear the board investigate that. Maybe one of the city staffers can answer that question. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hanson? Thank you, sir. It looks like we don't have any more hands up. I'll give you one more chance here. Okay. In that case, Mr. Dobrovolny, do you want to address us any more in regards to some of the testimony you just heard?
Just briefly, if I could, not too much.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. I do appreciate everybody that spoke tonight. I do question when they start saying, well, my property values are going to go down and things of that nature. Well, let's look at that apartment building that's in the, I believe, the 500 or 400 block of West High. What happened to the property values around that? They haven't been diminished. The neighborhood isn't any less walkable or ride your bike. You don't know when you walk out the front door and you see a person and they wave and say hello, whether they came from an apartment building or from the rest of the single family homes in the neighborhood. So if we're trying to build community, I would hope this is one way to do it. I don't foresee a domino effect that's been characterized. This basically just fills out that block. We're surrounded on all sides by high density units. And whether they started off that way or they became that way, so be it. That's what they are and they're there. So, and I have had many conversations with the gentleman at 401 South Kohler, and he doesn't oppose this. Now, the gentleman across the street, his neighbor, catty corner from this proposed change, does see it differently, and I understand that. I don't think it's a battleship pointed at his front door. It can be a complement to his home. So for those reasons, Mr. Corkery also made a point in his letter or email that because of this drainage tunnel, it would split the property and wouldn't be able to build a big building there. Well, then that solves his problem. I don't know. I just, again, I feel very frustrated that I see all these Black Lives Matter signs in people's yards in the State Streets area, and yet I don't see them doing anything about it. They don't have any Black owner-occupied single-family homes. They don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions for Mr. Dobrovolny? No? Thank you very much. I will now close the public input portion of this hearing and open it up for Plan Commission discussion. Any thoughts, Commissioner? Does it sound like any thoughts? Mr. Hopkins? Mr. Hopkins.
Yeah. I think an appropriate way to think about this is that it is a plan-making issue that has been debated and evolved and accumulated a set of expectations for 40 years and more, but 40 years I know of. And I think that the way to continue to work out a strategy for a neighborhood is through the planning process and not by a rezoning of 3 lots that would not be consistent with the current accumulation of plans. So I think many of the issues about how a neighborhood can evolve and have a particular set of characteristics that is not static, but is in some sense intentional, that we should deny this request, but acknowledge the continued need for planning processes that address the issues involved here.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Anyone else have something they want to add on to that? Mr. Weisskopf?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this, you know, I tend to agree with the sentiments just raised. You know, I did a quick I did a quick drive through the area today, and I do. You know, I'm a landlord as well, and I'm sensitive to that. And I did a quick, you know, counting of what properties were rental and what were single family in the 700 block. And I'm just going to quickly go through this list. You could start in the 700 block of West Illinois. 712 West Illinois is a rental. 710 West Illinois is a rental. 708 West Illinois is a rental. 706 West Illinois is a rental. 704 West Illinois is a rental. 702 West Illinois looks to be a resident. 700 West Illinois is a rental. 403 South Kohler is a rental. I could cross the street on West Illinois. 703 West Illinois is a rental. 705 West Illinois is a rental. 707 West Illinois is a rental. 709 West Illinois is a rental. 711 West Illinois is a rental. 713 West Illinois is a rental. That's the 700 block of West Urbana, and so this is a problem, and it's going to continue to fester. It's going to continue to be an issue, and it's not being addressed by the current plan. And, you know, I too would like to see some growth and development on the part of what a plan would look like to address actually what's happening on the 800 and 700 block of West Urbana. Because often it seems like we're being told that that's all, that, you know, that's down zone to single family and that's all single family, you know, family there. No, incorrect. Incorrect. We're up in the 700 block here, and almost every single property is a rental. There's a way to do this that's strategic, and ultimately, I would say I would challenge these everybody who's against this, who, again, I'm sympathetic here, but everybody who's against this, be proactive. Talk about what you want to see from a, so okay, you don't want to see some crazy development like, Champaign or whatever, but what do you want to see? Do you want to see growth? It's put a stranglehold on this area, and you're going to have the 800 block, the 700 block of West Urbana, California, Illinois, Oregon. It's going to be rental property that's just going to die on the vine on 700 block of West High. I mean, so that's what you're in for on the current trajectory. That's just my view. We're just in for problems here. They're either going to sell, they'll be, it's just, I don't think the people who are against it really acknowledge the reality of this area. That's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Weisskopf. Anything further, Commissioner? I mean, to Mr. Hopkins' point, I've been on the commission for like 13 or 14 years, and there's constant tension here. These are largely, they're homes, but they're multi-family. And so I think that the planning process, I hope, will take a look at what the current regime and see, is there something we can do better? Because right now that it's a stasis, I guess you could say, and which leads to Mr. Weisskopf's point of a steady decline in some areas. So we can't solve that problem tonight. We've got a particular request ahead of us. And so I'm just going to focus on that for now. And as the planning process unfolds, maybe we can discuss some of the rest of it. So anybody else?
Here.
Yes.
So I echo the sense of the overall, housing quality decline on the 800 and 700 blocks when new development is not able to be put up. Something that I like to see on the neighborhood would be something, if you guys can recall, 708 and 710 West Green Street. There was two little really rundown houses, and just in the last 2 or 3 years, it was built to be two single-family looking multi-unit houses. I think that type of development brings value to this community. So if it's something like that, I think it might not be a bad idea for the community. But for this application per se, without any detailed plan of what they wanted to do, I really don't think it's quite appropriate for me to draw a conclusion of if I would in favor of this plan. But a high quality development that fits into the neighborhood, from my personal perspective, would be something I'd like to see.
Thank you, Ms. Yu. Anything further discussion-wise? Ms. Billman?
I agree with Ms. Yu, except that could be done in R3. It doesn't have to be R5. It doesn't have to be rundown houses. Why don't we just keep it as it's planned? Not go with, this big conglomeration that he wants to put in.
Well, I do want to remind you, there's no proposal here. This is a zone. Now it implies something. Yeah.
I don't want R5.
I get you.
And I think there's no reason not to keep it at R3. That's a nice in-between stage. Just as planned.
Thank you. Mr. Fell, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I kind of feel along the lines of Ms. Billman and Ms. Yu that we have the case here is upzoning a piece of property which currently kind of acts like a buffer, and the request is to upzone it which doesn't, it doesn't move the buffer, it jumps over what our current buffer is. And to me, the appropriate way to redevelop this lot, which helps appease the neighborhood, is to do it through a PUD. And the site is large enough that it easily can qualify under a PUD, and that allows the applicant to show what's going to be built, which then can help the neighborhood decide if that's appropriate. I don't think a blanket zoning where we can't see what this it's sort of a fringe property to me between really the multifamily part of the university and the single family part of Urbana. A PUD where we can see what's going to get built there is an appropriate way to do it, not just a blanket upzone.
Well, we'll talk about PUDs here in a minute, but I appreciate your comment. Anything else before we, Mr. Allred?
Sure. Just to put my thoughts out there as well. I'm kind of in agreement with Mr. Hopkins. I think that, whether or not this makes sense and, what it would eventually look like makes sense, this isn't necessarily the correct venue. I think what needs to happen in terms of rezoning individual parcels like this needs to happen comprehensively. It needs to be thought about in terms of the overall pattern and, the desires and the goals of the community, which are not going to happen through this sort of spot zoning process that we're talking about here. So I would be in the deny, I guess, group.
Okay. Well, any further discussion? Or are we ready for a motion? Ms. Billman?
I'll move.
Please do.
Okay, I move that we forward Plan Commission case or 2410-N-20 to the City Council with the recommendation of denial.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Billman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Yu. Any further discussion? In that case, if we could get a roll call, please, Mr. Riti.
Mr. Fell? You're muted, Andrew.
Andrew, yeah, there you are.
I'm sorry, I missed part of the motion. I vote yes to deny it, yes.
Yeah, for denial, yes. So your vote, yes, okay.
Correct.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Weisskopf?
Yes.
Ms. Yu?
Yes.
Mr. Allred?
Yes.
And Ms. Billman?
Yes.
That motion passes. And so there will be a recommendation for denial forward to the City Council, and that will be considered on, do we have a date for that?
Yes, it's November 23rd.
November 23rd. Okay, that concludes plan case 2410-N-20. Now we have two plan cases, which are a preliminary and final review of a PUD. This is plan case 2411 PUD 20 and 2412 PUD 20. Request by CCH Development LLC for preliminary and final approval of a PUD at 805, 807, 809 West California, 602, 604 South Lincoln, 804, 806, 808, 808 and a half, and 810 West Oregon under the zoning ordinance that governs PUDs. So Mr. Garcia, whenever you're ready.
Yes. Well, I bet you thought you'd get through 2020 without me presenting to Plan Commission, but you would have been wrong. Okay. So greetings, everybody. It's good to see everybody virtually again. I will share my screen here. Let's see. There we go. Everybody can see that, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And let me just pull up my notes. Okay, so this is a, excuse me. This is an application submitted by Mode 3 Architecture on behalf of CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC. This is for preliminary and final approval of a residential planned unit development. And this is in this location, as you can see outlined in red. It is essentially, excuse me, it's essentially the western half of this block, bordered by California Avenue, Lincoln Avenue, and Oregon Street. And then Busey just to the east is the other part of the whole block. So this development covers 10 lots, and it's directly across Lincoln Avenue from the Alice Campbell Alumni Center, which you can see over here. It's also just west. A lot of people are probably familiar with the Europa House, which is right here. Also, it's just a little northwest of the Joseph Royer landmark district, which includes the Royer House and then the mother-in-law cottage behind there. The development would include a mix of 70 single bedroom and studio apartments. And in this case, the applicant's asking for a waiver to allow the increase in the floor area ratio, and in exchange would relocate and reconstruct the sidewalk along Lincoln Avenue to make it feel safer and more friendly for folks walking by on that sidewalk. They also plan to preserve several mature trees on the interior of the site. Let me, before we, oh, you know what? I should be doing the full screen. Oh, not that screen, sorry. Okay, there we go. That's full screen, I believe. Okay, before we go into all that other stuff, I just wanted to give sort of a little photo tour of the site. This is looking from the northeastern point. So we're looking west down California Avenue. So this is the first building that you see. And then the property adjacent to that. And sorry, I have baby crying in the background. I'm not sure if people can hear. That's why I was kind of chuckling there. So there's the house next door. Then you have a series of 3 of these old 2-flat brick buildings, one here along California. And then this is looking back east along California. You can see the one that's at the corner of Lincoln and California. You see a large tree there as well. So then this is looking down Lincoln Avenue. You see 2 of those 3 brick 2-flats here. One thing to note along here is just how close the sidewalk is to Lincoln Avenue. It's probably a 2 foot, maybe a 1.5 foot little strip of grass between the curb and the sidewalk there. So then going further south, that's just a closer up picture of one of those buildings. This is looking back up Lincoln Avenue. Again, you notice a pretty narrow planting strip there, or I guess, sorry, grass strip. There's not really anything planted there. Then just a little bit south, there's this driveway here, a couple of driveways along Lincoln Avenue that sort of feed into this center area where there's parking for all the various properties, various buildings there. This is the, I believe it's called Axiom. It's a former, it was a house converted into most recently it was used by a religious organization. They had, I think, 11 people living in there. And then, so further south along Lincoln Avenue, just more of that property. Here's the front of that property. And then yeah, there's that sign. Axiom. Right now it's vacant. It's been vacant since December, since this past December. And then going east along Oregon Avenue. One thing I didn't mention in the staff report, which we could discuss, is there is a portion of brick sidewalk here that if this development did go through, I think we'd probably want to see that preserved if possible. But we can discuss that. And then there's a few houses along here. So this, you see the nearest one, and then there's these 2. The other 2 are the Dutch colonial revival style houses, which you can see there. And then you see Europa House further to the east. So just a couple of images of those houses closer up. And there's an alley here that serves Europa House. I think it's Europa House's parking, and then they have a swimming pool back there. And then just to fill out the block, this Europa House and then these other buildings we'll see are not actually part of the PUD, but again, they're part of the block. So this is looking back west. And then just a wider view across the street from in front of the Royer House. And then going north along Busey, I didn't get a great picture of this building, but it's set back up and it's got these stone steps there. That is not my finest quality picture, but that's the one that I got. And then finally, the last building that's there on the southeastern corner of Busey and California. Again, that's not part of the PUD proposal. Okay, so let's get back to what I've been talking about before. Sorry, I have to jump back through these. The zoning of these lots is a mixture of R4, which is medium density multifamily residential, and on California Avenue, and then R7, which is university residential on Oregon Street. They have pretty much the same development regulations as each other. They differ in mostly in the uses that are allowed. R7 is more restrictive, is one of the more restrictive residential zones in that it doesn't allow things like apartments. It really is focused on sororities and fraternities and rooming houses and things like that for student housing. Okay, so the zoning ordinance requires review and approval of preliminary and final planned unit developments. In this case, the application contains the necessary details required for a final planned unit development. So they've asked for concurrent review of both the preliminary and final PUD applications at this time. Since this proposal is within the Lincoln-Busey corridor, it would also, if the PUD is approved, that the plans would also need to be reviewed by the Development Review Board, and that's a separate process that just looks at the design, or sorry, it's the Design Review Board. I had a misprint in my staff memo. And then based on an analysis of the PUD criteria that you can find in your in the staff memo, staff recommends a recommendation of approval. So I get more into the details. So the site, it's about 1¼ acres. It has those 10 parcels with a mixture of residential uses. There are 3 houses. Excuse me. There are 3 houses, there are 4 duplexes, and there are 2 rooming houses. Based on the best records that we have available and on the uses on those sites, we estimate that 65 people would currently be allowed to live on that site collectively. All 9 buildings on the site were built in the period between 1900 and 1930. And they all, at least from the exterior, appear to be in pretty good condition. 7 out of the 9 buildings are 2 stories tall. It looked like a couple of them have some living space up on the 3rd floor. It would be the northeasternmost property and the southeasternmost property seem to have some living space up there. Along Lincoln Avenue, the setbacks are less than would be required. They're 10 to 12 feet. They range from 10 to 26 feet along California and from 26 to 34 feet on Oregon Street. There are also 6 separate driveways serving the site. And then folks park, or residents park in that middle area that I showed in the earlier photo. So let's go to, actually I'm gonna back out of this full screen and try and get to the site plans a lot quicker so people don't have to get dizzy with me scrolling through the photos, of which there are many. Okay. So let's pull this site plan up. So the site plan, the proposed development is a group of 3 apartment buildings. So there's 1, 2, and then 3 is sort of this bigger one here that wraps around. So they're in this U shape around the central parking area. The buildings are 2.5 to 3 stories tall. They vary at different points. The parking has the minimum amount required by the zoning ordinance. There are 49 spaces. It also far exceeds the bike parking with 76 bike parking spaces, which include 28 spaces here that would be covered and that would be secured with a locked fenced area as well. A lot of the this other parking that you see sort of along the I guess the perimeter of the interior parking area is all tucked under the buildings. And then the parking areas that you can see, so like these areas here and then this area here and here would all be paved with permeable pavement, so that allows better water infiltration when there's rain. As I mentioned, this would be a mix of 70 single bedroom and studio apartments. The building would be set back roughly 25 feet from the right-of-way along each street frontage, and they look to be constructed with high-quality materials. I'll let the applicants speak more to that, as I'm a planner and don't know much about materials. So the roofs would be pitched to help match the architectural character of the surrounding neighborhood, and they have different elements to make them appear less large than they are. So things like using different colors and different facade materials sort of help to break up larger buildings. The varying the depth of the building, so as you can see in these renderings, so the building isn't just flat. There aren't just flat walls, which tend to make buildings seem more massive. So it incorporates several design features to make the buildings seem less large. As I mentioned earlier, there are several mature trees on the site. So you can see in these elevations, you can see some notes that point out the larger trees that are on site that would be preserved. You can also see those in the site plan as well. And they designed the parking areas and they designed the parking areas in the building sort of with tree preservation in mind. So you see there's a cluster of trees here that would be preserved, some trees over here, and then a tree right there. That would all be preserved. They'd also take those six driveways and condense them down to just one coming off of California Avenue. So that would probably make it more pleasant and safer to walk by the site and also to drive by, especially along Lincoln Avenue, which gets a fair deal of traffic. Let's see. As I mentioned in my opening, you can see on the site plans that the sidewalk along Lincoln Avenue is shown on the site. The applicant would need to grant an easement to the city to allow the public to use a new sidewalk on that site, but they are willing to relocate that and move it further east onto their site, which we feel would be a benefit considering how close the existing sidewalk is to Lincoln Avenue, which, as I just said, gets quite a bit of traffic and it's not very pleasant to walk down there. The comprehensive plan shows this area. It identifies this area, the northern half, as medium density residential and along California Avenue, and then university residential along Oregon Street. And I can go back to that as I describe it. Neither of those terms are defined in the comprehensive plan under the future land use designations. There is a note in the comp plan about the Lincoln-Busey corridor, which says preserve these uses as they now exist while precluding further encroachment of higher density buildings into this unique residential area. So the uses on the site are all residential, and they include that mix that I mentioned earlier. So you have some houses, some duplexes, and some rooming houses. And as I mentioned, about 65 people could live there currently. The proposed development is for 70 single bedroom and studio apartments, which is a small, which is probably a small increase in the number of people that would be living there. Sure, you might get a couple people, you might have couples living in single bedroom units or studios together, but overall, it's probably not likely to be that much of an increase in the number of people living in there. So the, so the density, these really aren't higher density uses that are being proposed here, at least in terms of the amount of people that live there, which usually seems to be what people are concerned about when talking about density. So the maximum floor area ratio in the underlying zoning districts is 0.5 in each of them. I did a calculation that I think is pretty conservative, but the existing buildings on the site have a floor area that already exceeds that. It's 0.63. That's not including the additional third story residential use in those couple of buildings that I pointed out earlier. The proposed development has a floor area ratio that's higher than that. It's 0.76. So the new buildings would take up roughly 25% more volume than the existing buildings that are on the site. And as I mentioned, with the larger setbacks along Lincoln Avenue and California Avenue, and using some other design features to make the buildings appear less smaller, the largeness of the buildings on the site could be mitigated. So that floor area ratio, which really tries to get at building scale and building mass, that could be, the additional floor area ratio could be mitigated with those design elements. The PUD would help meet quite a few goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'd be happy to discuss some of them. I'll just hit on a couple of them. So goal number 2, objective 2.1 says ensure that the site design for new development in established neighborhoods is compatible with the built fabric of that neighborhood. Goal 3 is that new development should be consistent with Urbana's unique character. Objective 5.1 is to encourage development patterns that help reduce dependence on automobiles and promote different modes of transportation. So this being right next to the university, you'd probably get a lot of people living there who walk to the university. Actually, in the last case, somebody mentioned that this neighborhood is great because you can walk and you can ride your bikes to places. They're proposing, as I mentioned, to exceed the minimum bike parking requirements and have that covered bike parking area, which would be nice for folks who bike. Let's see. Goal number 28 is to develop a diversified and broad, stable tax base. Typically, apartment buildings bring in more on a more tax revenue on a per acre basis than things like single-family homes and duplexes. Also, to encourage development in areas where adequate infrastructure already exists. That's goal number 34. And there are more, but I feel like the presentation's getting long, so let's move along. There are also general 9 general goals for planned unit developments in the zoning ordinance. And we feel that the proposed development is generally consistent with goals 1 through 7 out of those. There's more detail in the staff report. But I think specifically, or I'll just read the goals here. Actually, so goal number 1, I'm a bit on the fence on this one because it says to encourage high quality, non-traditional mixed use and or conservation development in areas identified in the comprehensive plan. It's not clear what is meant by non-traditional. So I'm not really confident to say whether this meets that goal or not. So let me amend my earlier statement and say that this is consistent with goals 2 through 7. So goal 2 is to promote infill development in a manner consistent with the surrounding area. Goal 3 is to promote flexibility in subdivision and development design where necessary. Goal 4 is to provide public amenities not typically promoted by the zoning ordinance, the sidewalk in this case. Number 5, to promote development that is significantly responsive to the goals, objectives, and future land uses of the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. That's what I just outlined a couple minutes ago. Number 6 is to provide a higher level of street and pedestrian connectivity within the development and the surrounding neighborhood in accordance with the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. So closing those driveways we feel would help with pedestrian connectivity, although there are already sidewalks everywhere surrounding the site. Number 7 is to coordinate architectural styles, building forms, and building relationships within the development and the surrounding neighborhood. Number 8 is not applicable because it's really pertains to larger developments. And then number 9 does not apply here, and this might actually weigh against the PUD, because it says to conserve to the greatest extent possible unique natural and cultural features, environmentally sensitive areas, or historic resources, and to utilize such features in a harmonious fashion. They are planning to save several mature trees on the site, but I feel that this goal is talking about larger natural features, like if you were developing on a site on the edge of town, and you had a stream or an old growth stand of trees or something on the site. So I don't think that really pertains here. But with respect to historic resources, as I mentioned, all of the buildings on this site can be considered historic resources. They were all built between 1900 and 1930. They all appear from the exterior to be in good shape. None of them, so we have historic surveys of all of them. I didn't find anything in there that said any of them were especially significant from a historic perspective, but once those buildings are removed, they'll be gone forever. As I think somebody mentioned in the last case as well. To qualify for a planned unit development, there must be a gross site area of at least half an acre, which this site has. Also, there are 4 different criteria that they can qualify under, and this qualifies under unique development, which says development that significantly responds to the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan and other relevant plans and policies, and or addresses unique features of the site. I already discussed a bit the waiver, the reasons to grant a waiver to allow the floor area ratio to be increased from 0.5 to 0.76. So I won't go through all those again. There's a little more detail, I think, in on page. Actually, I'm not sure what page this is on. Well, there's more detail under the floor area ratio waiver section in the staff memo. So the criteria for approval, I'll go through these hopefully with relative speed so we can get along. Number one is that the proposed development is conducive to the public convenience at that location. This project would be a residential development on a site that's directly across from the University of Illinois campus. It's pretty close to the businesses down on Gregory Street and is close to the Krannert Center for the Performing Arts. The project would provide housing choices for people who would like to live close to the university in a small single bedroom or studio apartment, and it's convenient for people walking, biking, and taking transit. Number two is that the development is designed, located, and proposed to be operated so it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the surrounding areas or to the public welfare. So the scale, massing, and architectural style would fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. The number of people living there would be pretty similar to the number that currently live on the site. It would remove those 5 driveways, which should improve safety for people walking and driving in the area. And relocating that sidewalk along Lincoln Avenue would be beneficial to the neighborhood. Number 3 is that the proposed development is consistent with goals, objectives, and future land uses of the Urbana Comprehensive Plan. We feel that it is based on what I discussed earlier. Number 4 is that the proposed development is consistent with the purpose and goals of section 13.3, which are the PUD goals, and I just mentioned that it's consistent with goals 2 through 7. And then number 5, that the proposed development is responsive to the relevant recommended design features identified in table 13.2 of the zoning ordinance. So there are a lot of different design features that a planned unit development can incorporate. And this one incorporates many of them, including architectural design, access, bike parking, permeable pavement, maximum parking, which is to provide the minimum amount of parking required, putting rear parking, which is putting parking behind the building, parking area landscaping, and tree preservation. The options that the Plan Commission has in each of these cases is to, you can recommend approval first of the preliminary development plan as attached to the staff memo. You can recommend approval with conditions, or you can recommend disapproval. The same holds for the final development plan. You have those 3 options. Staff recommends that Plan Commission forward both cases to City Council with a recommendation for approval with 2 conditions. One is that construction be in general conformance with the attached site plans and elevations, subject to minor modifications that may be required by the Design Review Board. And then number 2, that the sidewalk along Lincoln Avenue be reconstructed further to the east on the applicant's property and at their expense, and that the applicant provides an access easement to allow the sidewalk's use by the public. Apologize for a rather lengthy, or it seemed lengthy to me, presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I can confirm it was a lengthy presentation. No, it was great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Garcia?
Yeah, Mr. Allred?
I can't see him. If you could stop presenting so I can see that.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Okay. So this, you might not be able to answer this. Maybe it's for the petitioners, but for that buffer strip in the reconstructed sidewalk, in terms of the landscaping, it seems like it just shows grass, but would there be trees potentially in that as well, or?
That is a good question for the applicant. I believe those are just preliminary sorts of, a preliminary, plan for where that sidewalk would be. We would need, we'd need to consult with our engineers also on the exact location of that sidewalk, but I don't know the plans for landscape in that area.
Thanks.
Any further questions for Mr. Garcia? I just have a clarifying question. So the purpose of the PUD is because you can't have apartments in R7? Is that correct?
That's one.
I mean, the waiver is something else. But
So there were a couple of options that the applicant could have pursued. The PUD, which is allowed in R7, that's the only way that you can have apartments with an R7 zoning. The other option would be to ask for a rezoning to R5, which from a staff's perspective, we don't like that as much because it doesn't come with any certainty for the city or for the neighborhood. In planned unit development cases, you actually get to see the plans. You get to, what you're approving is what ends up getting built. Just rezoning to R5, you don't know. They could max out the FAR at 0.9 once that rezoning goes through. So.
All right, thank you. Further questions for Mr. Garcia? In that case, I will once again outline the procedures for public input and also go over the communications that were received that I deferred from the earlier agenda item. So the petitioner will get to address the Plan Commission and lay out the case for why this should be accepted. Then anybody who's in favor of the proposal will get to address the commission. Following that, anyone who's opposed will be able to address the commission, and then we'll give the petitioner the last say, and then close the public input portion and discuss and possibly vote. So we did receive at least 19 communications on this, much like this last case, all in opposition. And the reasons for opposition were similar in some cases to the reasons that were cited in the last case, and this included the character of the neighborhood, traffic and parking, violating the comprehensive plan, surplus of multifamily housing, and things of that nature. Specifically to the PUD, there was some sentiment that some people liked some of these aspects. The different changes in the exterior, the peaked roofs, the saving of the trees in particular. But the sentiment was that the amenity of the sidewalk in particular was not enough to justify the granting of a PUD, that there needed to be something more significant, such as serious energy efficiencies or things of that nature. So that's the general tenor of the communications that we received. So now if we could, if the petitioner is here and would like to address the commission, please feel free to do that. I don't know your name, so I don't know who to unmute.
Yeah, Jacob Unzicker has his hand up. He's one of the.
There he is. Yeah. Okay, you should be able to go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Well, first of all, so this is Jacob Unzicker, Mode 3 Architecture, and Josh Daly, Mode 3 Architecture. And thanks, Kevin, for the run through. You did a really good, thorough job, so appreciate it. We just first wanted to say that when we were first approached about this project from our client, that we took this very seriously. We have some experience. We like, as an architect, we like a challenge, and we have some experience going through this process in Urbana. We, not too long ago, a few years ago, were able to go through this process for 809 West Nevada, which is a couple blocks south. And so having gotten that experience, we tried to learn from what we went through at that point and use what we learned and apply it towards this new site. And our client was very amenable to that. They did not, at our suggestion about what would work at this site, they were agreeable with us that this was not a place to come in and try to maximize density or try to ask for something that was quite over and above what the existing requirements were. So we felt like that we were in good partnership with them on that to come up with what we are presenting today. So some of the things that we had learned from before, obviously working in this area, was that having the as Kevin mentioned, this is in the Lincoln-Busey corridor, and there are very good guidelines that are published on what the buildings that are constructed in this neighborhood should look like. And so that was kind of what helped to drive the design, I would say. The other thing is that when we first started looking at this, we both, Josh and I, took a drive over there, walked the whole site, and one of the things that just really stood out to us was these massive trees that are just throughout this neighborhood, and even back in the center of the lot where some of the parking is now. And I just remember us kind of looking at each other going, man, wouldn't it be great if we could just find a way that we could just build around these and keep this, because it's kind of a really neat feature that, normally if you're going to come in and do a new development, trees kind of get in the way. They keep you from just building where you would like to build. So early on, we thought that would have been a nice thing to preserve. And so we suggested to our client, and they agreed, and they paid the money to have a survey done to locate all of the trees on this property. And we utilized that when laying out the site to make sure that we preserved as many of these trees as possible, and actually built or laid out the buildings around the trees. So that was another thing that we felt important to kind of help anchor this development with the surrounding fabric. I guess one other thing, I know we were just talking about, I don't want to monopolize this, Josh will talk too, but I know we were discussing, the topic came up about other things to be given in exchange for doing a PUD. I guess first of all, when we designed this, we really tried to adhere as much to the existing requirements as possible, and have actually done that in terms of the height of the building, open space, parking, all those types of things. The one area that we were only asking for leniency on was floor area ratio. And as Kevin pointed out, we know that what's there now is actually already in excess of the requirements. This would also be like that, a little bit more even than what's there currently. But in addition to what Kevin mentioned about trying to follow the Lincoln-Busey corridor guidelines in terms of interrupting the massing and going with a scale that is more in line with this type of neighborhood. We also were looking to do more sustainable type features to this. And Kevin did mention the permeable paving. That was one feature. The other things that we were incorporating into this would be that the parking is covered. A lot of the parking is covered, and although this is not a project that the client is anticipating pursuing a LEED certification for, there are several aspects that would qualify for credits if they were pursuing that. One of them would be reducing a heat island effect with covering the parking. So besides covering the parking with the building, we're also saving these trees, you know, that cover the parking. So that's one aspect. This project has quite a bit of open space because we've set the buildings quite a ways back from the right-of-way, around 25 feet on each side. And the amount of open space that's provided in this proposal is, I believe it's a 0.42 ratio. The requirement for, I believe, the current zoning, we're not even talking about R5, but R4 or 7 would be 0.35. So we exceed that. That's enough to get a LEED credit for an open space. That's enough to get a credit in LEED for open space under their sustainable sites category. And then we also will be making sure that these buildings are designed in accordance with the current 2018 Illinois, that's the current code in effect for energy efficiency, the 2018 Illinois Energy Conservation Code, which will be a definite improvement over the current buildings, which I know it's not a fair comparison because that did not exist back then, but it's just to point out that the energy efficiency of these buildings will be in line with current standards. And then we also are proposing that these covered parking areas will be ready for fuel efficient vehicle charging stations. We've also discussed the possibility of, although solar is not probably the most viable option for this type of project because of being in central Illinois and also that we're preserving trees, so there's going to be quite a canopy there. We also have discussed making some possibility for providing infrastructure into the attics of these buildings if for some reason the ownership would want to install solar panels on the roof. And then the cladding of the buildings, the major cladding material is actually wood siding, which we've checked, and the company that we are specifying currently does derive their material sustainably. It's a renewable type product. So I guess, I know Kevin had mentioned that the category 1 of the PUD criteria goals, I almost wonder if we might be able to consider that this is non-traditional in the sense that we do have some other sustainability features that maybe would not be found on just any project. But anyway, I guess I'll go ahead and let Josh talk about some of the other main points that drove how we got to the design that you see today.
Sure. This is Josh Daly with Mode 3 Architecture. I'm just going to hit on a few of the things that Jacob just brought up. But truly, as he said at the beginning, we took this very seriously when we looked at this site. And this is, in my opinion, unique to this neighborhood. This is a site that is directly across the street from the Alumni Center on our beloved U of I campus. I think that's important. This project was designed to give a presentation to our campus. Lincoln Avenue is different than another block 1 or 2 over. I think this has different I think this has different constraints, but I also think it has a different feel entirely than the next block over, or south or north. So we took those things into consideration when we looked at this site. And as Jacob alluded to at the beginning, the trees were the first thing that drove this design. It really truly dictated the decision to break this project up into, actually there's 5 separate buildings here. The one along Lincoln appears as one in these plan views, but it's really 3 buildings that are connected by some small roofs over these entryways. If you would refer to the renderings, probably that would help you see that. So that really kind of drove, the trees really drove a lot of the decision making on where these buildings were going to end up. And we wanted to make sure that each face had a very good visual appeal to each street, including the trees. So that's a lot of what drove our design from the beginning. The second thing, of course, as Jacob alluded to, was the residential scale. Instead of doing a big U, 3 stories, perhaps flat roofs, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it sloped roofs, residential in scale, smaller structures. Could have gone 3 stories if we really wanted to, but I think we didn't like that because we didn't want the scale to be intrusive at all or too massive from the street. So what you're seeing is 3-story sections in the middles of these buildings that step down to 2 stories, and then on California, even a 1-story section. So we tried to vary the massing of this in a way that will make it look like separate buildings. It was the idea. Walk-up entries to some of the apartments. We have walk-up entries on Lincoln Avenue. So those entries facing on the Lincoln Avenue elevation, if you look there, that's just small roofs that connect those 3 buildings to give a pleasant entryway for tenants that are going to live here. In the spirit of the Lincoln-Busey Comprehensive Plan, using wood siding, we got some stone masonry on the bottom, good articulation with the windows. We tried to group windows together. We can get into that later with the DRB guideline meeting, but took into consideration all those things to keep in with the character with other nearby structures. The third one that was really important to us was the vehicle parking. We didn't want to see any cars from any perspective, so we tucked everything back into the interior of the site, which really is what it has now. There's a lot of the driveways, as Kevin said, so there's a lot of cars parked in driveways that you see currently. To improve upon that, we didn't want any visible cars from these 3 streets. And the decision to put the driveway for California is not random. It's because we didn't want to have any of the street trees affected. So all the street trees that are in right-of-way are not affected at all by this project. The driveway placement is very on purpose because it's between trees. So parking, recycling area, trash enclosure, again, concealed. Won't see any of that from the street. A fourth one, I have 5, so I'll keep going. A fourth one is we thought it was important to allow light and air down into this site. So again, another reason to step this building in a way and separate them to allow some light and air to get to these trees that we're trying to preserve. So right in the center of the site in our parking scheme, we have some pretty large specimens there that we're trying to save. And that actually dictated our parking layout as well. So that's another factor in this, was trying to allow light and air down into the center of this block, because we are going to have units that are going to face inward instead of outward. So we wanted to make sure that they had good light and air capability. The setbacks, as Jacob mentioned, are significant. The corners of the building, on the street corners, we stepped them in a way so that there's better visibility through to the neighborhood. So it's not just right up on the corner and kind kind of blocks your view. We alluded to the FAR items, and I think those are the main ones that drove our decision in terms of the design of this. I guess the last thing is that, you know, if you look at what's there now and the presentation from our Alumni Center, I think this would vastly improve that. And it's something that I feel would really be something to be proud of on the west end of this neighborhood. We're completely familiar with all of the concerns and all of the labor and love that people have put into their homes on the eastern part of this neighborhood. This is the far west end facing campus. And I think a development like this puts a good face to this neighborhood. I think this is one block that really will emphasize the quality that can be achieved through this neighborhood. So that's my presentation there. If Jacob has any more.
I was just gonna tack on one more thing. We discussed the offsetting the sidewalk inward onto the property, and when that was presented to us, I think we agreed that seemed like a very good idea, and so we were very glad to incorporate that as part of the design. Client as well, and that came in a little bit late, so we do intend to work with the engineering public works department, figuring out how to address that buffer space. But yeah, our intent too is to provide a landscaping plan on the property as well. That is something that would be reviewed in more detail for the design review board presentation. But yeah, just wanted to point out that yeah, that's totally what our intent is, to provide complementary plantings within there, not just to make it again, we wouldn't have much to address about the what would need to go there in terms of the standards, but I know that we would want that to be beautified in some way to complement the rest of the project. So yeah, I think that in conclusion, we think that this is a attractive proposal. We've tried to adhere to all the guidelines that we know of and have gone through previously to make it cohesive with itself and with the rest of the neighborhood. And again, there was not an intent to come in here and try to build something massive. It was truly an effort to try to build something that would be conducive. It would not create any harm, but also be a new, refreshing, project in this area. And like Josh said, to provide something that kind of complements the location in relationship to the university. So yeah, we would request that that it would be approved and recommended.
Yeah, to finish up one more thought, I have one other interesting fact about this block. I know everybody, we like to talk about open space ratios and floor area ratios, and we can get hung up on what that is and calculations, but an interesting thing, we've got really 5 structures here that we're proposing. Existing is 9. So those 9 buildings, plus we've got detached garages currently, a couple sheds. When you look at the footprint of that on the site and what that occupies versus the new proposed, the footprint, I'm not talking FAR, I'm just talking the footprint, porches, everything included, covered parking, etc. It's 10% more than what currently exists. So in terms of that just shows you how much open space we have kept intact on this project. I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important to know that FAR is one thing, but And truly, too, these are one bedroom and studio units. So yes, we can talk about 65 people can live on this site now. Okay, but we're going to provide 70 good living experience units on this site, energy efficient, and have all the modern amenities that would go with living in today's world, not the world that the 65 65 units, I should say. They're not very conducive to living. They're not up to code and other items that I could go on about, but we're providing 70 good units here. And it's close to campus too, so anticipation is that we provided more bike parking on purpose. The hope that will get used, and I think it will. It's got a good shot of being used. We have met the parking requirement, but this is one of those sites that would be very good for biking and walking to campus almost extensively. So that's it. That's my conclusion, and I will turn it back over to you guys.
Thank you. Do any of the plan commissioners have questions for the Mode 3? I'm not seeing any questions. I just had a couple that are just sort of, what do you think, who's your target market here? I mean, single room apartments imply maybe grad students, maybe somebody a little older, maybe somebody a little more responsible. I don't know what you think about that.
Yes, absolutely. That's I know our client can speak to that better than we can, but in designing this, that did come up as to that clientele. So absolutely.
Yeah, rather than some other developments that we have been a part of, there was a desire to have multiple people in the same unit. It's three bedroom apartments, that kind of thing. This is different. This is intended to be more a different type of crowd.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a ballpark of what the rents are going to be?
No, we don't.
No,
sorry about that.
No, I was just wondering, if affordable housing could be viewed as a valuable thing. So that's all I had. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. And now is there anybody in the call who wants to speak in favor of this proposal? All right, is there anybody on the call who wants to speak in opposition? And I will remind, as I did in the last one, that especially if you've already emailed us, we have read your emails and are familiar with your concerns. So if you could please try to be succinct and keep it, on point and as brief as possible. And so raise your hand and I'll go through and allow you to talk as in the order I see you on my screen. And the first one then is Leslie Sherman.
Hello, my name is Leslie Sherman. Again, I live in the 500 block of Oregon Street, which is just down the street from this proposed development. I am against this development. I believe that when I bought my house, I understood the zoning of my house, that it was a single family house. And I feel that if someone buys a property, they have to understand what the zoning is and they should respect that zoning. So there is R7 zoning. I do not think that the PUD should be allowed. The owners of the property purchased those properties with the understanding of what they were zoned at the time per the comprehensive plan. And they should not assume that because across the street there may be higher density slightly down the street does not apply to their side of Lincoln. That this east side of Lincoln should be preserved as a comprehensive plan says with the zoning that currently is set for it. If you buy a property there, I believe you should, just like with my house, my neighbors would not like me to suddenly put an apartment building here, that they bought it at that zoning and they should maintain that zoning as the comprehensive plan says and promotes. Even if which frustrates me very much, as this is the third or fourth development that people keep trying to do on the Lincoln corridor, that Lincoln-Busey corridor, to try to increase the zoning, to change the zoning, not respect the comprehensive plan and the zoning that's currently set for those properties, to put higher density than is allocated for that, and they don't take into account the fact that you're increasing, there's this mention, yeah, the location might be good for walking and for biking, but they're asking for an increase in the density of people living there, the density of the property, but they are not providing associated parking. I live right down for the street. We already have that. The street is full of parking already. And now you're going to go more into my part of the neighborhood, and even all the streets around are now going to have to adjust to the parking that will be required, because you don't have someone who's in an apartment that's just going to walk and bike. They're going to want a car so that they can go to the grocery store and things like that. And so there is not enough parking in that to handle all of the units. And so that's going to go onto the street and already overload a fully loaded area with parking that already has a lot of street parking. And in addition to that, while I do appreciate that development, that the architect's attempts to try to match the neighborhood more, I still feel that, and a lot of the features of preservation of that, and I really appreciate that, that they're changing their views, understanding that that's important to the neighborhood. And I appreciate that, but I still feel that they should be developing to the zoning that they have and shouldn't have to ask for a PUD. Just like was done farther down on Lincoln, they actually developed within their zoning and they did not have to have the PUD instead. So, and now I'm talking about closer to Nevada that was done there. So we do not need to do that increase. And I don't think I'm asking you, please do not support this. Please deny this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Sherman? No? Thank you. And then we got Mary Pat McGuire.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Fitch. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having public input tonight. I'm speaking tonight as a resident of West Urbana. I'm the owner of 804 West Nevada Street, and this property, my home, is located within 250 feet of the proposed development. On October 22nd, so just 2 weeks ago, we received a letter, my neighbor and I received a letter regarding the proposed planned unit development that would consolidate these 10 lots into the PUD. My neighbor is Marie-Pierre Lastiva Moulin, who lives at and owns 806 West Nevada Street. She was not able to be here tonight, and she has asked me to include her in my remarks this evening. So I want to share some concerns about this PUD as it's currently proposed, with a focus here during Plan Commission on the planning aspects and the planning dimensions of this project. If we look at the basic statistics of this project, the proposed project is 50% over the FAR that's legally provided by zoning. The proposal basically replaces the existing housing capacity, but in larger solid footprints. The PUD is adding 25% more imperviousness through large building footprints and pavements to the site. This contradicts one of the intentions of a PUD, which is to use innovative green construction practices. There are no amenities or benefits that are provided by this PUD, which are actually required by a PUD. And the staff report that we were given suggests that the sidewalk is an amenity of the PUD, which is not. It is not. Living in this corridor and walking along and across Lincoln on a regular basis, I can attest that there is a kind of public safety issue along Lincoln, and it is a kind of deferred issue. Lincoln Avenue and the streetscape definitely needs a pedestrian safety redesign from about Green Street to Florida. But I think this is something for which our city is responsible, and should not be the responsibility of individual block by block developers. I don't think that the design has shown significantly adds anything to the extent that it's saying it does about safety. There are a number of comprehensive plan goals that the staff report lists on page 3 and 4. And I'm concerned because I don't feel that the presentation of those goals is made very clear in that report. Any development here is supposed to preserve and enhance the character of the established neighborhood, but this proposal is demolishing buildings. It is not preserving anything. It's not preserving the buildings. The staff report acknowledges that we would be losing 10 buildings that were constructed between 1900 and 1930 that would be lost forever by this proposal. And you can see from the photos that Kevin Garcia showed that the series of buildings is actually in keeping with the comprehensive plan as they are now, and that many of them are in good condition. Again, this has to do with also the compatibility of the proposed land use with the design and fabric of the existing neighborhood, pardon me. And large new buildings are actually not compatible with the neighborhood's existing pattern of buildings and open space between buildings. There's another comprehensive plan goal, which is about producing more energy conserving land uses, but this proposal doesn't improve that here. It actually, the preservation and the restoration of the existing structures would actually be the most energy efficient design possible here, given that the embodied energy in those structures is as it is. So to demolish a whole set of historic buildings and to extract new materials and construct all new buildings is actually a very high energy intensive proposition for the site. And I think that that would need to have more study. I'm also concerned that the development of new pavements in the new parking areas, of which the impervious area is quite small, would be contributing to more concrete production and more stormwater runoff. This was not discussed at all in this land use proposal. Goals 19, 28, 34, and 49, which were also all addressed, having to do with housing supply, existing infrastructure, reduction car use, et cetera, aren't met better with this proposal than the existing land use and buildings. So I'm not really sure how replacing almost the same number of living spaces with this larger proposed project is improving on the existing site use and land use here. Most importantly, because this is proposed as a PUD, there aren't any reasons for that I'm reading at least or hearing that are being put forth for this to qualify as a PUD under our zoning ordinance. Goal number 1 calls for high quality, non-traditional or mixed use or conservation development, but we're not getting either of the latter two. We're not getting mixed use development. We're not getting conservation development. And what I think that high quality or non-traditional development here suggests is something about the innovative and high performing nature of a proposed land use that PUD would put forth. And the points that are made about land use and the architectural approach that we're hearing tonight and seeing are somewhat fairly standard. And so I just want us to be realistic that this is fairly standard. So I want to be honest about that. And goal number 2 is about promoting infill development, but this is not infill development. This is not a vacant or an underutilized site. Development already exists here. Goal number 3 is about being more flexible, but 50% higher FAR is not just being flexible. That's a very extraordinary increase. And the PUD doesn't provide anything in exchange for that increase. Again, number 4, a sidewalk is not an amenity. The setbacks are not an amenity. And preserving mature trees is fairly standard practice today. This is not an amenity. And so I just want to say that, you know, we could go on and on, but I honestly don't know why the developer proposed this particular project here. It doesn't actually enhance the neighborhood. And what's upsetting to us here in the neighborhood is that there was really no public process on this project. Procedurally, a proposed PUD of this kind of nature, this kind of land use or scale of development would benefit by having a public conversation, a public meeting, but no public meeting was held. Public notice was only given to us by News Gazette on or around October 21st, and then a staff report was released on October 30th, which is just last Friday, before the hearing tonight. So I want to say that I think that one of the problems that we're getting into is that we're all faced with having a meeting right now to discuss both preliminary and final approval proposals without actually having had any real dialogue about the project. And I want to say to ourselves and all of us in the city that it would be better if we had more communication, community input, and deliberation before we get to a meeting and discussion like we are this evening. I am strongly requesting that the Plan Commission does not approve this project this evening, and that given the choices that the city staff have offered Plan Commission, that you choose option 3, disapproval at this point. The reasons are that the proposed PUD does not advance the comprehensive plan goals beyond the existing land use. The proposed PUD does not meet the requirements of a PUD. And further, there was no public input solicited for this PUD, which I think is really should become a requirement of a proposed PUD with this kind of scale of change to our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Is there anybody else? And I will, just looks like we've got no other hands up. Well, there's one. Christopher Hansen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hansen. I live 3 blocks from the proposed development. So I'm a longtime West Urbana resident. I'm against the proposal only because they appear to be using the same abhorrent lights along the sidewalk that were used at 809 West Nevada development, which look absolutely horrible. They should change that. And then if they change that, I might be in favor of the development because it looks, I'm in agreement with the people who like the historic houses. I would prefer that. But what's not been suggested, and I'm kind of going off of what Mr. Weiskopf said earlier, what's not been suggested is how, I guess, either the significantly costly restoration of those historic homes is going to happen, or is someone going to rebuild historic homes? Clearly, several of the 10 properties, at least to me, are not aesthetically valuable in any way. The ones along West Illinois, not at all. I like some of the ones that are on the state streets, the east-west state streets, but without, this seems like an improvement to the neighborhood, and without, they're saying the old houses are not up to code and run down. I mean, it's not clear to me what's going to happen besides a development at some point. So I guess I wonder, people who are maybe I can't see the 19 or so emails that were mentioned that were opposed to the project, but maybe when the board discusses this after I finish talking, you could tell the public what were the alternatives proposed by people who are against the project. What are they proposing is going to happen instead of this development? That's going to be good. What's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years? I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
I can address that. My reading of the letters is that they didn't propose alternatives. It was strictly, opposition to this particular proposal. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hansen? No. Any other person want to address the commission? Okay, well, does Mo3 wish to add anything final before we close public input? Mr. Unziger?
Sorry, I had to hit unmute there. Yeah, thanks. Well, I guess, yeah, we appreciate getting the comments, particularly the last comment about the bollard lighting. I guess I'll say really quickly, when we were involved in the Lincoln or the 809 West Nevada project, and that was actually provided on that project to try to meet certain requirements that had to do with the lighting level that we had to provide along the ground. And it was challenging, I'll just say that. And that was one method that we utilized to try to accomplish that goal. So, but I'm glad we got that comment, because that's something that we will look at as we move forward to the DRB process to try to maybe accomplish that in some other fashion. So appreciate that comment. Otherwise, I guess there was a couple of things I wanted to mention that we heard that we wanted to clarify. One was about the parking requirements, and we actually wanted to make sure that it was clear that we did follow the parking requirement for the current zoning district, which for a single bedroom apartment is 0.7 spaces for that unit. And so that results in 49 parking spaces, and that's what we provided. We decided to go with just the minimum required parking instead of providing more parking, since we were trying to provide, I guess, an alternative to that, which is bicycle parking. So we just made sure we did the minimum vehicular parking. The other had to do with runoff, and yes, we definitely had that in mind when we looked at this, to try to minimize the amount of permeable paving, and that's part of why we were suggesting to try to find ways that we could, I'm sorry, I said permeable. We want to provide permeable paving in some areas to help mitigate that issue and not provide any additional taxation on the stormwater infrastructure. So anyway, yeah, just we appreciate getting the comments, but we thank you guys for reviewing this and look forward to your decision.
Great, thank you. Are any final questions for Mr. Unzicker? No? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll close the public input portion of this hearing. And I'd like to know if there's any points of discussion the Plan Commissioners would like to raise. Anybody have thoughts? Ms. Yu, are you reaching for your, there you are.
Yes. So I have mixed feelings. For all the properties, 10 properties on the site, 3 of them on the R7 district, I'm worried about those kind of big houses, and I really would like to see a new use for those houses. But on the other side, there are, especially along the California and Lincoln side, those duplexes, or I think there's one big group home, but at least 4 nice, really well-built duplexes. It's sad to see them going away. So that's kind of my overall sentiment about the existing buildings. But given that if someone is going to do something for that site, I think this design is pretty solid. And yeah, that's what I feel about this.
Great, thank you. Anything further? Mr. Fell?
Yeah, I kind of feel in some ways the way Ms. Yu does is one of the drivers we've gotten on the Plan Commission is not only the big apartments, but the group houses that tend to attract big groups that are louder and noisier and more disruptive. And this development takes away a whole bunch of these big group houses and replaces them with single unit residences, which is a totally different demographic, which is what this neighborhood has reinforced to us that they want to have. So I'm also kind of there's a dilemma to me here, because I think the scale and the use of what's proposed here is appropriate, but I also have sympathy for the neighbors. I think one comment that I just can't help but make, as one of the opponents brought up, over the last, since I've been on the Plan Commission, we've had easily half a dozen or more cases to come up to do a development along Lincoln Avenue. Maybe what that tells us is our comprehensive plan is wrong. Maybe if all the developers think this is what's appropriate for this area, maybe it is. We get it over and over and over again. And so I think that perhaps is something that the people that look at the comprehensive plan should take under consideration. It's been reinforced to this body over and over that this is the use that's right along this corridor is not the highest and best use for it.
Thank you, Mr. Phil. Thank you. Further comments? Mr. Allred?
Yeah, I'd say I have mixed feelings about this as well. I think, you know, the degree that it responds to or furthers some of the comprehensive plan goals are kind of questionable. I mean, I agree that it's not infill development. There's development that exists there. That development provides housing choice. I'm assuming that it's, you know, more affordable than what new construction will cost in terms of rents. But I agree that, you know, the fact that we've had several requests for rezonings or PUDs come up along this corridor, particularly along Lincoln, suggests that the zoning is, you know, sort of out of whack with what the market is looking to provide. I think it is kind of troubling, you know, in the past, some of these proposals have, or some of these developers who've come forward with proposals have held, not charrettes, but have held some, or have done some engagement with the public to try and get their input earlier along in the process to try and respond to some of their concerns. As you mentioned, Mr. Fitch, there wasn't a lot of sort of constructive criticism in the comments that we've got. There were some hints at it, but nothing that was really useful in terms of negotiating a PUD, you know, and asking for some concessions in terms of granting flexibility. And I think maybe some of that might have come across or come out in this kind of venue that didn't seem to happen. And I think that's disappointing. And, you know, I don't know if it's too late in the process for us to try and go back and give the public a chance to provide some constructive criticism beyond just, you know, the straight opposition to anything happening on the site. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I could go either way.
Thank you, Mr. Allred. Ms. Billman.
I'm also confused. I came into the meeting not knowing which way I would vote, and I haven't changed my mind about that. I still don't know. I had hoped that you guys could convince me one way or the other. I agree with Ms. Yu that if something is going to be built there, I think this was a good idea. I also hate to see some of those buildings along California go. Those 3 brick duplexes, and there's a really nice yellow frame duplex there and a single family house. I don't see any reason for them to go. I also understand that a developer probably isn't going to want to put in something really small in those other spaces. I just don't know what to think, and I don't know if I can vote tonight.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like hung elections are kind of in the air, so not unusual. Mr. Hopkins?
So I think we have an option or a couple of options to continue this. And I think that might be the appropriate strategy for several reasons. One is the short lead time that most people, to some extent including us, and in part because of the differences created by Zoom land So one reason to continue it is to give everybody more time. A second reason to continue it is I think that in many ways, this is headed in the right direction. And I think one of the ways to understand an edge and a neighborhood strategy is to make decisive edges. And the face of Lincoln is a decisive edge. And this is on a block in which the backside on Busey is already large buildings, group buildings. And the general form of this, the only real surprise is the FAR in terms of construction by right. Something close to what is being presented is probably significantly better than construction by right would allow. And I think, as Andrew pointed out, preserving a rooming house because it happens to have been given R7 zoning because it was already a rooming house is not necessarily consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan or the Busey corridor plan. But given what other commissioners have said, and given the point made by some participants, is I think it is difficult to work all the details out in one meeting. So my suggestion would be, and we need advice from Kevin here on how we might do this, is to continue this to the next meeting.
All right, I'll just wait on that, and then Kevin, we'll have you straighten this out. I agree with Mr. Hopkins. I think that, and others, there are a lot of things to like here. I think this is what the Lincoln-Busey corridor, something like this is what the Lincoln-Busey corridor concept wants to have happen. You want there to be development that is compatible with the neighborhood, but which is across the street from the university and is attractive to, in particular, that population. So I think something like this is what needs to happen, or what the ordinance wants to happen. I'm a little concerned about the FAR. So that's really the sticky point. And I agree that if we just rezone the R7, then we lose all ability to talk about the design. And R5 is not appropriate for there, I don't think. It would be worse than what we're contemplating here. So I would be inclined to continue. So Mr. Garcia, if you want to weigh in on that. And then if we do continue, I think we're going to have a motion, a second, and a roll call.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine to continue. And I guess what I would ask for is what the Plan Commission needs from staff, or would need, what additional information? Is there any additional analysis we can do? Anything that you need from the architects in the interim, or is it just to continue to give everybody more time to consider things?
I think Mr. Fell had raised his hand, and then I'll come down to Ms. Billman, then Ms. Yu.
It may be a small point, but shouldn't we ask the applicant what he wants to do? I mean, does he want to continue he may not want to continue the case. He also may want to continue the case longer to have a public meeting before we meet again. So I request we have to let the applicant at least have a voice here.
But yeah, before we move and vote, I agree with that. We'll, if he's still on, then we'll definitely get some feedback there. Now, Ms. Billman.
I couldn't read the small type on the site plan. I don't know if I'm the only one that way, but I even printed it out so it'd be bigger, and then it cut lots of things off. So I would like to be able to see a different kind of copy of that, of the site plan, and also are there floor plans for it?
The way I handled that, Ms. Billman, was to do it in PDF on my laptop and zoom in and out. I don't know if you're comfortable with that, but you're right. Some of it was pretty hard to read unless you zoomed way in. So I would try that, but city staff could also work with you too.
Are there floor plans?
I don't know. It's a good question.
So maybe city staff can explain to people how to display it, but the last three parts are actually large drawing sheets.
Right. Yep.
That, especially if you've got a decent sized screen, you can pan around at full size so that they're readable. Yeah. And from what I could find, there are no second or third floor plans, and there are no apartment layout plans, but there are general plan. For the first floor, there are plans of the arrangement of the apartments on the site. Those are the only floor plans I saw.
Ms. Yu?
I just want to get some clarification about public hearing. I do remember this case a while ago had a public hearing for this block. I don't know if it's for the same developer or the same design though.
I don't think it was this block. It was a block just down Lincoln, closer to Nevada. Is that
no,
right?
it is this one between Oregon and California on Lincoln side. Huh. It might not be a public hearing, but I do see the pamphlet of consolidation of the lots and development. I saw something from city website.
Yeah, there was a developer that had proposed a planned unit development here that was significantly larger than the one proposed tonight. It was 5.5 stories tall. I think it had about no setbacks.
Yeah, I do remember that now.
They had an open house at the library, and shortly thereafter withdrew their application before even coming to Plan Commission.
Okay, that clears it up. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Yu. Mr. Allred?
Yeah, just thinking, in terms of continuing this and what we might want either from the staff or from the applicant, just in their sort of description of the project, I feel like they did a much better job articulating what the project is doing sort of above and beyond conventional development that didn't necessarily show up in the materials that we were given. So maybe something can be done along that line to better articulate, some of the discussion about, not going for LEED certification, but using some of the LEED criteria in terms of how they're thinking through the design, putting in place features that allow for the future installation of solar and those kind of things. I think that makes a difference beyond, the critique that we've gotten that, a sidewalk doesn't necessarily weigh against this flexibility that we would be providing in terms of that significant increase in FAR.
Thank you, Mr. Allred. Anything further before I ask Mr. Unzicker how he feels about, Mr. Hopkins?
Yeah, when Kevin asked the question about what we might be looking for. So far, I've thought of three things. One is more sharing time, which includes sharing with the public, but also us. And it's not just sharing time, it's making sure people can actually see and hear and find the information, because with not only with Zoom, but with restricted electronic communication, looking at a big plan drawing, for example, is more complicated. So we need to make sure people can actually see these things. The second thing would be some more details on the FAR issue. And to me, that means both what the implications are for the project of what is dependent on that extra FAR. And then sort of linked to the third thing is understanding what would be possible by right. So by right, assuming no change in zoning, we've got R7 and R4. How many units, that kind of thing, so that we can sort of be clear about how much trade-off to get a PUD is in the little details and how much of it is in the difference between by right and a PUD as a mechanism of decision-making, which I think is an important part of it.
Lou, do you mean by right just in terms of development regulations? Because use-wise, you can't do apartments in R7, so that would be.
But most of the site is R4, right?
The north half is R4, the southern half is R7. There's 3.
All of the southern half is R7? But you can build dormitories in R7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, by right, you might be able to build a pretty big dormitory in R7.
Well, the max height's 35 feet and the max
Okay,
FAR
but
is
that's what I mean. Partly because you still have my notebook. I don't have the zoning ordinance in front of me.
That was my
like
fault.
I would at a meeting to look at these things.
Yeah.
So, and we can worry about how I got my notebook back later, but it's having information like that available in deliberations.
Okay,
great. Mr. Weisskopf?
Yeah, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I feel bad I missed the earlier rounds. I was so wanting to jump in and my phone, whatever, and I'm happy to be here on Zoom. Okay, I'll express unpopular opinions here. We talk about this every time. We see this all the time. I mean, so it's a delay here, and as we act surprised. Okay, there's 20 emails against with no potential alternative, no even musing at it, being like, oh, well, if you did this or thought about that or whatever. And so, we could delay. And my thing is, if that's what we as commissioners want to do to further get a sense of the details, sure. But ultimately, we'll wait another, few weeks and have 40 or 50 emails that directly oppose it. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess my impression is that it's not going to get any better than this, folks. That's my impression. If I say what I think is the unpopular truth, they're removing 4 dangerous buildings. 804 West Oregon, I've been inside. It's a 14-bedroom rooming house. And no, I'm not saying you should go condemn it right now, but it's a reflection of the reality of 100-year-old structures directly adjacent to an ever-growing and dynamic university campus. And by adjacent, literally across the street. So you never get everything you want, but they're talking about one-bedroom units, the most lowest impact form of unit. And did anyone say, hey, great, they're all one bedrooms. We know those traditionally aren't the party ones. Those traditionally, no. There's not even a recognition that that's the best possible scenario as far as density and as far as the load of people there. So you know, if to get more details and further delay it, yes, you know, if we think that's to get, you know, that's worth it, then sure. But I'm against that, and I think that we're, you know, we're not being honest about the situation, and you know, I'm of the opinion they're not asking for any parking. So, and as far as R7s being mixed into the mixed, to do a PUD is to clean up the zoning, because R7 is so confusing. But I don't see it. That's just me. It's my unpopular opinion, but I don't see anything about the existing 10 buildings that in any way is worth it. But I know it's not about that per se, but all right, I'll shut up now.
That's okay. No, it's a free speech zone. Ms. Billman.
I'm glad to hear what you had to say, Jonah.
Okay.
It's important to hear that side.
Yeah.
I'm still not ready to vote.
Okay.
So
Mr. Hopkins.
Yeah, I think that again, sort of going back to the message, if we choose to continue it, going back to the message that should go to staff and to the applicant is time. The message is, this is close to what, in my view, ought to happen on Lincoln Avenue. That's what I was saying before about a decisive action on an edge. And this is the edge. And it's likely to be an improvement. So the message is not, okay, give more time to the opponents to drum up more letters of opposition. That's not, in my view, what this is about, or appropriate, frankly. But I think we have had relatively little time, and it's a little more difficult than usual to look at. And we're being asked for preliminary and final here simultaneously. Actually, if it were only preliminary, I might be more willing to go ahead, because I think the basic strategy is what's appropriate for this site. In any case, that's where we are. I mean, we have to decide what we're going to do.
Right. I think those are good points. So we had a couple plan commissioners suggest they're not ready to vote. So, I mean, to me, that's the main reason why I would consider a continuance. And to Lou's point, to let us all get our heads around this a little more. If the city and the developer want to do some more outreach and see if there's any modest changes that could be made, maybe that. But I kind of agree with you, Mr. Weisskopf. This is really close. I mean, and I might even go for it. I don't know. Mr. Weisskopf.
I would tell them not to do, I mean, a public meeting might scare them away from this project, but okay.
You could be right. I'd leave that to the developer and the city staff.
So can we?
Let's talk to Mr. Unzicker and see. You look like you can speak, Mr. Unzicker. I don't think you're muted.
Yeah, this is Josh Daly again.
Josh.
Yeah, the reason for going the route that we did is the COVID world. That's number one. Full honesty, didn't really know how productive a meeting would be, other than hearing opposition.
Yeah, you've had experience with other properties.
So I don't really know how productive it would have been. What constructive criticism would have come out of it? So, you know, as the architect, we have a client who wants to do a project. We're doing the best we can. And again, very sincere about this. And we did our job. So here's what we presented. Limiting what we're asking for as best as possible and try to deliver a quality development.
Right. Yeah, we do appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, our hands are a little bit tied because of the issues that are going on with the pandemic. I will say that. You know,
Sure.
For the developer going forward, you know, approval of this is important. Otherwise, it kills a project. It's going to kill a project, is what's going to happen. That's just the way it is. I know from people listening, that's not important to them, but that's how economics work with this kind of thing. And again, we're not trying to pack 4 and 5 bedroom apartments on here. I feel like this is respectful in nature and good intended all the way through. So
sure. What about 2 weeks? What does 2 weeks? That would put us on Thursday, the 19th of November.
Is that hard?
I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay with us.
Mr. Hopkins?
I would also say, I don't think we are directing the client or the architects to arrange a meeting with the neighborhood. But what I was suggesting is that the lead time of the information being out, even for the plan commission, and partly again because of the form of it, was difficult to pull off in a quick time. And as I said earlier, I as an individual, I would be saying that the intent is to move this kind of project forward. It's an appropriate kind of project. We're approving a final site plan. And in the form, and the drawings are all there. It's just that the electronic form they're in for some of us, I figured it out with just enough time to be able to pan the drawings and look at them in some detail. I'm just thinking that other people on the commission have not had that time.
Yeah, Mr. Weisskopf?
I mean, if 2 weeks isn't going to send them packing, then I guess it is what it is. But correct me if I'm wrong, they have a whole nother board to go through, correct?
Well, they've got 2.
Right, a whole nother 2. A whole
They
nother
got
2.
design review and the plan commission.
And then to city council, which ultimately they'll have to, so it all adds up. But yeah, if they're not going to run and drop away in 2 weeks, sure.
Right. And I'm talking about 2 weeks, not.
No, I agree.
We're not sending it off for redesign. We're not sending it off for whatever. It's just that. Anyway.
Mr. Fell?
I think I asked this question once before, but just so I know, what happens if the design review board makes them redesign it after we've approved it?
It's possible. Hopefully, I've already had input.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the condition that says, recommending approval subject to the site plan with any minor changes that the design review board might offer. I mean, that's not the greatest condition. It was the greatest one I could come up with at the time I wrote it. But if the design review board said you have to move this building across the site or something like that, then I don't think it would meet the spirit of, what would be.
It's essentially similar to any other PUD. Site plan is approved. Staff has ability to make approve minor variations to the plan. Same situation. Okay.
Yeah.
So the design review board is looking at facades and materials, and maybe I need to be clear on what scope of discretion the design review board has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
They look at, yeah, we have specific design guidelines for that corridor, which I don't have them right in front of me.
But the
yes, no. So I think what should be approved for the PUD would probably be, we might want to be specific that it's just site plans, and we could say elevations, and maybe we could add something that's materials and things might change during the course of design review. So maybe we could be more specific.
Okay, but since we've sort of opened this up, the architects already know what the design review board criteria are, correct?
Yes.
And so in what they're presenting to us, at least they are aware of the extent to which they believe they are meeting them.
That's correct.
So I'm going to take the attitude that we can push this forward based on the things that matter to us without, assuming that the design review board will keep its focus on what it's supposed to focus on and nothing more.
All right. Anything further before we entertain a motion to continue and reconvene or reopen this case on Thursday, November 19th?
I have one more question. This is Josh again. What in 14? What are we asked? And what do you want in 14 days? I guess is what I'm. Maybe I just heard some of that, but
I think that the consensus of what I heard is that we're not really asking you to do anything. If you think it's appropriate to revisit some aspect of the design, then that would be between you and city staff, in my opinion. And if you want to involve the neighborhood more and you think that would be productive, that would be up to you. But I don't think we're actually asking you to do anything. Is that correct, Lou?
So one suggestion that I think somebody else made is in your presentation.
Oh, Mr. Allred, yeah.
You highlighted some things that may have been in the application, but your presentation was more effective. Let me put it that way. And you might take your presentation notes or something and send an addendum or something. I mean, part of this is just communication that's difficult because of Zoom. At least that's my problem. Maybe not other people's problem.
All right. Well, can I get a motion to continue and reopen the case on Thursday, November 19th? I move that we continue the case and with the intent of reopening it on Thursday, November 19th, 2020. Second by Ms. Billman. So let's do a roll call.
Okay, this is for a motion to continue and reopen on November 19th. Moved by Mr. Fitch, seconded by Ms. Billman. Calling the roll, Mr. Fitch.
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins.
Yes.
Mr. Weisskopf.
Yes.
Ms. Yu.
She might have fallen off.
She has babies.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Allred.
Yes.
Ms. Billman,
Yes.
Mr. Fell.
Yes.
Okay, 6 ayes, no
Mr.
nays.
Hopkins?
You got
Mike.
mine.
You got, all right, great. Okay, well, then that is approved, and we will reconvene then and hopefully be ready to make a decision. So I appreciate your work tonight. It's a long meeting. And so I hope that you'll be able to go home and get some nice rest. And thank you to everybody who was participated and gave your feedback either through email or verbally on this call. So we have no new business. Is there any audience participation? Does anybody want to address the commission on something that's doesn't have to do with this case, but does have to do with planning?
I see hands from Mary Pat McGuire and Leslie Sherman and Christopher Hansen.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go in order that I see on my screen. Mary Pat McGuire.
Hi, yeah, this is Mary Pat. I had my hand up earlier because what my recollection from previous hearings is that there would be time for public input and then some deliberation, then a chance for the proposer to respond, and also a chance for the public to also then respond, so that there's more of a dialogue. And I would think that in the context that's been put forward, that given that this has been the only opportunity for us to talk through the Zoom mechanism, and am I seeing that some of the plan commissioners have now logged off or disappeared?
One did due to personal reasons.
Just in terms of public process for the Plan Commission, I have to speak on behalf of our community right now that this has been a very upsetting conversation to hear. And there's basically been a dismissal of 20 letters and the comments that we've given. And there was never
the case has been continued, so we're not going to continue to talk about the case.
This is about a conversation about the public process.
You're welcome to come and talk about the case at the next meeting. As far as our bylaws, we followed the process that's laid out in the bylaws. We do have to review our bylaws periodically. We just did that not that long ago. I think they'll be coming around again in, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, maybe. We have to review them every year. That would be the chance where we could look at the process and amend the process. If to give another round of public input, I guess you could say.
What I'm requesting by my follow-up comments is that that if you are looking for feedback on any Plan Commission case from the public, i.e. recommendations, that you make that very clear, and that the letters be considered still, and that some of the statements that are being made about the site and the role of planning and the role of a PUD. A PUD purpose is not to clean up zoning, for example. A PUD has very clear criteria, and we as neighbors within the area would like there to be more of a process, not to just basically steamroll this project through. I think you'll be hearing from the public because this conversation's been very one-sided. And there is an openness to understanding the changing nature of our community on all of its frontages. But this process is not yielding a very good result, I think, in terms of a shared understanding about and really creative ways that you can incorporate feedback into this process. The fact that the Plan Commission didn't really feel like they even themselves had enough time to review the material before making a decision is indication enough that we don't have a good process in place. And that concerns me very much as somebody who lives close within this, who is actually responsible for part of this process along the way. And I'm speaking on behalf of some notes that I'm receiving because people don't feel that they have the ability to have a conversation with this Plan Commission right now. So that's my comment.
Okay,
I will
thank
follow
you.
up. Thank you.
Somebody's sharing a screen that has a timer on it. So is that the 4-minute timer? Okay. Leslie Sherman.
I very much agree with the comments that were just made. I feel as if my comments were ignored, and that especially, you know, one of the most alarming statements that I heard by a couple of the commissioners was that maybe the comprehensive plan is wrong, and because developers want to develop here, then we should just listen to them, and maybe we should change the comprehensive plan to meet what developers want, is essentially what I heard. And I'm paraphrasing, I realize that, but especially with, I believe Mr. Fell was trying to imply this, that maybe it's just wrong because there's a need by developers to develop along the Lincoln corridor. And I feel that that very much disregards the fact that the comprehensive plan is there to protect the nature of where I live. My neighborhood is West Urbana. I live 3 blocks from Lincoln. And so that encroachment of having more, I bought here because I like the nature of the neighborhood. I did not buy here because I wanted to have 3 blocks away for, you know, a solid block of apartment buildings all along that area. And so, and this is not just about that one property. This is a general consensus.
Again, the case is continued. The case is continued. If you're more than welcome to come back and bring your concerns regarding the case at the
No, I'm not talking
meeting.
just about that case. I'm talking about an attitude across all of the commission that I heard multiple people say, disregarding and being willing to do that. And to me, I'm just raising a concern as a neighbor and as a citizen of Urbana and my property values, that they are being disregarded. And, you know, that comprehensive plan was put in place. And I really hope that you will start to respect that more, because I really don't feel like it's fully being respected in terms of that Lincoln-Busey corridor. Because just because a developer wants to develop somewhere doesn't mean it's appropriate, okay? It just doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate. And having, you know, I think there's some disregard for the fact that that will change the character of the neighborhood and of that block. Just because there's the Europa House there doesn't mean that it's okay to just disregard that. You are allowing and setting a paradigm that will be repeated along the way. And what's very important, and while I agree this development is much better than other ones I've seen, and it really has been, I still, you know, my concern is that this is a trend, okay? And while you get to look at it one by one, we're talking about a trend, and that's what the comprehensive plan is there for. And I'm really hoping that you will respect that plan more thoroughly instead of deciding that, you know, it really shouldn't be there because there's a demand by developers. And to me, that's my biggest concern. And I'm not trying to be rude to anyone on the call, and I really appreciate your service on the Planning Commission. But at the same time, I'm concerned about the property values of my house and the quality and the atmosphere of my neighborhood. And I have every right to do that, yet I feel like my voices and the comprehensive plan are not necessarily being respected as much as a result. And the same with when you have 20 people who are not supporting a plan, maybe that means that it doesn't have the support of the neighborhood. And if you have a plan that doesn't have support of the neighborhood, shouldn't that be taken into account, not just personal opinions about the inappropriateness of the comprehensive plan, which is what you're supposed to follow? Thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you. And is there still anybody? Christopher Hansen.
Hello again. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Christopher Hansen. I've lived in Urbana for almost 20 years now. You've heard me twice tonight already. I think the first thing I want to really quickly point out, with all due respect to Mr. Fitch, it is not appropriate to interrupt people when they're giving their public input. And you interrupted both Ms. McGuire and Ms. Sherman. Also, the Illinois Attorney General has made it very clear that during general public input at meetings, you can't make any content-specific limitations. So even if someone is commenting on something that's unrelated to your agenda, it still is on your agenda that you have public input. So that makes it an agenda item. So people can speak about things that aren't on the agenda, even if what they say is annoying and nonsensical. There's been a few attempts tonight by, I think, people on both sides to kind of claim that they're representing the community. You know, Ms. Sherman just said, you know, there's a consensus about this or that. I really hope this board ignores all those claims by both sides. People can speak for themselves. I don't like this idea that someone's representing me. I live in West Urbana too. I live 3 blocks away too. What, you know, say Leslie Sherman says is a consensus, I'm not included in that. So I hope the board will consider that, and I hope the people from the public listening will just represent their own ideas and not kind of claim that they represent the whole neighborhood. I also hope that the letters that are being referenced into this case will be posted so that we can see them. I see there were a few emails posted for the first hearing that you did tonight, but I couldn't, maybe I'm not looking in the right spot. I couldn't see the 19 letters that were mentioned. There was also a claim earlier tonight that parking is an issue and that people have more and more cars these days. I think that's a fact, not an evidence. I'm pretty well interfaced with that area and with the student community. And my observation, kind of, I guess anecdotally, has been that people actually have fewer cars these days than they did 10, 20 years ago. So I wonder if this board wants to direct city staff to provide some data on that. I don't see parking as a problem, and it seems like the development that was just proposed has plenty of parking solution. Issues of noise were mentioned, and we even heard Mr. Fitch kind of suggest that because these are 1-bedrooms, they're going to be attractive to more, quote, more responsible people. I'd like to see the data on that. Are we just kind of characterizing people? I mean, even if there is data, it's not quite fair to characterize the types of people who live in certain dwellings. I mean, so we could look at crime data right now and someone could say, oh, well, because of the data in front of us, it's clear to us that, say, African Americans commit more crimes. Therefore, we shouldn't have African Americans in our community because it means more crime. Well, none of us believe that. None of us want to do that. So I wonder to what extent we're going to characterize the types of people who live in certain types of buildings and then claim that they're going to have this or that sort of lifestyle. Last, there's been a discussion about the comprehensive plan and what developers think is responsive to the market. And it's, Ms. Sherman is right, it's not just about developers, but also on the other side, there's been a market indication by single family home buyers that they don't want to buy these houses. And the proof is that they haven't bought them. Because every time one of these houses in this block has gone up for sale, and I don't know the history there, the market has had an opportunity to bid that price up and own that house. And if it's the case that these houses are run down enough that no one can see the value, then it's not just developers that have indicated their market position. It is both developers and single family home buyers that have indicated, we don't want these houses as they are. And last, I just want to ask a question. Were you guys as a board, were you consulted at all about the new public input rules? I'm just curious.
No, that's, as a matter of fact, I just got those today, and you were correct. I was not supposed to engage. So that was wrong on my part. That was my bad. And so I do have to understand these better and follow them more closely. So I apologize for that. Is there anybody else? Dan Corkery did. Yes. Mr. Corkery.
Hi, once again. I just wanted to say, well, actually, it's a question. Is there a new comprehensive plan in the works? And if so, who do I need to talk to? And that's all my question.
Mr. Garcia could probably elaborate on that more. The short answer is yes. There is a new comprehensive plan in the works.
Yes, there is a new comprehensive plan in the works. We're going to be starting our outreach in pretty short order. The pandemic kind of slowed things down a bit, as it has with many things. So I was going to give an update to the Plan Commission here in a minute when we get to the staff report section of the agenda. So hold tight.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any further public input? I don't see any hands. Oh, there's one went up. Eric Sachs.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
So given that there will be a new comprehensive plan in the works, is there some way that the city residents can be notified of this pretty directly? Even finding out about these projects in our neighborhoods with a little sign posted on a corner can be very difficult to see in a timely fashion. So that's one question. I do think from the comments that were made earlier today that I'm sure I'd very much like to see all of the planning commissioners take seriously the opinions of the residents of the neighborhood, as well as the owners of various properties who want to develop them. I heard some comments that basically suggested that the residents who were opposed to a development should be ignored. And that's really not a good way to build a community. And I would encourage the developer to reach out to the community. And yes, some of those conversations might be difficult, but it's better to have a difficult conversation than to have no conversation at all. So if someone could answer my first question, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
Right, yeah, Mr. Sachs, I think there may have been a couple of questions in there, because I think, so one is about the comprehensive plan. And I think the second one was about sort of just notification in general for specific planning cases or zoning cases as they come up. For the comprehensive plan, as I mentioned a second ago, I'm going to give a little bit of an update just here in a minute or so after the audience participation section. So if you just stick around for another few minutes, I'll give an update on all of that. But the short answer is yes, there will be ways for the city to contact or solicit input from residents directly.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Sachs?
And then, shoot, did I not? I didn't get to the second
Yeah,
part,
right.
which was about just projects in general as they come up. So we have specific rules that we must follow by law to post signs and post things in the News Gazette. And that's, I know those aren't the best ways for folks to get information about upcoming cases. I feel like probably with technology that's available to us, we might be able to do a better job of just of getting information out there ahead of time, or just ways to get that info out there on our website or something to indicate when there are upcoming projects coming. It's not something we've discussed for a little while, but it's definitely something that's on our radar. For the couple cases tonight, we did post some information on our proposed development projects part of the website, but like a lot of things on our website, it's kind of difficult to find that unless you know what you're looking for. So we recognize that we have some shortcomings there, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to address those going forward.
Thanks for answering the question. I might suggest maybe neighborhood email lists for those who want to receive information from the planning board might be nice, or reaching out to posts on, let's say nextdoor.com or something, or various sites like that.
Yeah, and I could. We do have a communications. Well, I guess we've had a communications person for at least 2 or 3 years now, and I can talk to her and see if there's some good ways that she would have of contacting folks as well. But thank you for the for those suggestions.
Much obliged.
Ms. Billman?
Oh, Esther Pat posts to the WUNA list, but it's not clear to me if the city had all the information very much ahead of time.
Well, yeah, so that's for these planning cases, you know, we get an application in typically about a month before the meeting. So we have the application, and we have site plans and things, but we aren't always just working on one case. If it was a matter of, you know, me just putting together this one case and that's all I had to do for the month, then, you know, I could have gotten it to you weeks ago. But cases take time to prepare. So a lot of times it is, you know, we are getting things together sort of, you know, in the few days before that staff report goes out. We might be able to build in some time to get those reports done further in advance and share it more in advance than required. I don't know that there would be any issue with that. So that's something we can look into.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to thank everyone for your audience participation. I'll try to learn the new guidelines better and behave accordingly. And again, I apologize for the interruption. Do we have a staff report?
Oh, we do. So a couple of things. First is that the Vital Skin special use permit that you all reviewed, I think on the 24th of September, maybe. That one is going to council this coming Monday because there was also a variance request that they had. So we wanted those to go to council together. So no report on whether or not that has been approved, but we will know after Monday. And then the second part of the staff report is comprehensive plan news. So we've been working for these months behind the scenes, getting prepared to do our public outreach. We've been working with, we've been working on a website with a graphic designer, and been working with a company to put together a website that'll have a lot of public engagement components to it. So we're really excited about that. Since I'm not leading the project and I don't know all those details, we are going to have our comprehensive plan two-person team that's leading that come to you on December 10th, if you all will have them to give an update on where we're at and where we're going. And I'm pretty excited that we're finally at a stage where we can come to the Plan Commission, present those things and get some feedback, and then move forward.
Thank you. Anything further?
One thing to note, the rezoning case will go to committee of the whole on November 16th, prior to the Plan Commission meeting on the 23rd.
Great. Thank you. Anything further on staff report? No? Okay, we don't have a study session. So at 10:25 p.m., we're adjourned.